Oh, wow, that is really good. For everyone that
shit.
doesn't know what's going on, Mitch is showing me some of his really nice tattoos.
Yeah, he just like
pinups.
laid back on the couch and spread his legs up in a V shape.
I had to show my calf.
I saw the forbidden starfish. No,
Oh,
yeah.
that's you got to save that for Patreon, Mitch.
Are you talking about my thigh tattoo?
Yeah. What color are your toenails, man?
You're listening to the Art and War podcast with your hosts, Mitch and Nathan. Mitch is a former airborne infantry squad leader who now spends most of his time coaching soccer. Nathan is a professional illustrator and an avid shooter with a couple of years of Canadian military experience. Together, they run the Seaburn art page. Enjoy the show.
That was this thing. We had a whole group chat dedicated to fat shaming, and
we do.
I got a DM from somebody. I don't remember who. It might have been on our Patreon, and they're like, "I need at least 5 minutes of fat shaming every episode." So,
did we actually?
Yeah, I think that was on the Patreon, or that was in the on the Instagram. I don't remember.
All I remember is getting that message, just like, "Wow, you guys are fat phobic" or something like that.
Oh yeah, and we only got one.
We only got one. Every single other, like dozens, hundreds messages is just based.
Yep. We're up to 30,000 people looking at our story, making fun of fat people. And only one person has reached out and been upset about it.
And you know what's funny? They're probably fucking fat.
They were. I don't know if she listens to this.
I'm sure she's got a good heart.
She follows us. She's liked our stuff. Now she... We're called fat in the podcast.
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I'm just a casual
neither did
observer.
I'm sure she's a lovely person. People should know that, like, we joke about it, but it comes from a place of construction, in before fucking toxic masculinity or whatever. We're hoping, and dozens of people have sent us messages saying, "Hey, that's the push I needed. I'm going to lose some weight," or we've got a bunch of messages from people saying, "Hey, I lost a lot of weight because of some dumb meme you posted a while ago." It's nice.
Yeah, making fun of fat people is really, it helps you figure out what type of person somebody is. Because it's like that thing where if somebody picks on you, you can just kind of accept that and then become whatever it is that you're getting picked on for. Or you can be like, no, fuck that. I'm going to change it. And I like the people that do the latter.
Yeah. And, I've experienced that a lot. When I first got on the team, there was a dude who was like, "Hey, dude, I'm really overweight. I need help. Can you write me a meal plan? And I want to be like you or whatever." And I'm not tooting my own horn, but that's a quote. And I was like, "Yeah, dude, of course." And I sat there on night shift and banged out this meal plan, a 10-week meal plan, and a full workout plan and everything. Like 3 or 4 weeks goes by, and I'm like, "Man, how's it going? You seen any results?" He's like, "Dude, it's too hard. I can't lose it." So then 6 months goes by, he got fatter. He's like, "Can you do something to help me?" Like, "Man, I already fucking did it. You just need to stick to what I gave you, or find something else that works for you, but don't keep coming to me." And you keep fast forwarding, and he just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So even worse than the people who just accept it is the people that go and ask for help and then don't follow it.
Let's talk about that.
Absolutely.
Before we get into it, today we got Jared from, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I always pronounce it as Orion. Is it Orion?
Yeah. No, it is. So, no, that's really common, and we can play into that later for some other people that have mispronounced it before. Okay. But no, it's Orion with like the Orion constellation. Yeah.
Okay. So today we have Jared, the founder of Orion Concepts Training.
And Training Group, yes.
And Training Group. And he has a lot of experience being on a SWAT team, being part of law enforcement. And I bring that up because there was a problem with obesity in the Army somehow. I don't fucking understand it. And there's obviously a problem in law enforcement. We see fat cops all the time, but you were on a SWAT team. Was this guy on a SWAT team with you that was fat?
Yes. So what y'all have to understand... Say again. I think you cut out there, Mitch.
How does that... I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it just blows my mind how you're part of a job that requires you to be physically fit, and you get fat. I don't understand it.
So it's multifaceted. One, shit rolls downhill. So if people aren't accountable from the top to be fit, or they don't have a fit leader, they have no reason to be fit. He's not doing it. Why should I? So that's rule number one, right? If the guy in charge is not doing it, why the fuck should I do it? It's for most people. And we're talking about lowest common denominator, right? You're in the Army, or either both of y'all serve, right, in your own respective capacity. So you've seen it, I'm sure. I don't know how it is in Canada, but it's that's how it is here. People exist by the lowest common denominator rule, which is manufactured by the powers that be to retain people. And that's the second part about it with law enforcement. We are at a 65% reduction in recruiting in America for cops. So at the department that I left, they have a 55% attrition rate. So if 100 people get hired, 55 leave. So it's negative growth.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So, and it's a department that normally would have
never heard numbers.
Yeah. So I don't know who published those, but that was as of 2 years ago. It's probably worse now. But how are you going to have a SWAT team if nobody's there? So if you didn't implement a fitness test, you allowed people to get weak and soft, and then you say, well, now we have a fitness test. You're going to run your own team off, and then you won't have the capability that you have on paper because it's not real. It's not a real capability because people can't actually perform to the standard, but it looks like you've got one, and that's what you can tell the people above you. So all the bureaucracy and the kiss-assery that allows you to have your job, that contributes to not wanting a good PT test, or at least a functional fitness test. And then individual motivation comes from, well, nobody else is doing that, you know?
Have you ever talked with Pat? Oh no, you did. You did live with him from Uncensored Tactical.
Yes.
Yeah, you just did live with him, and I watched that. So Pat was a former law enforcement Tier 1 operator in the Coast Guard. So he was like the cool guys in that video that was like jumping onto those fucking subs and pounding open the door. That's the type of shit he did, except over in Somalia and some other places. And he is coming out with a whole book about bureaucracy and why it ruins organizations that seem like they're doing well.
He told me about that.
Problem.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the military. We have a physical fitness test. We just spent like 4 fucking years trying to implement this new one, the ACFT. And it's still awful. Like the 2-mile time for the new physical fitness test, it's like you have 22 minutes to do it, I think.
Are you fucking serious?
20, yeah, and this is supposed to be the new and improved. This is how we get everybody on the same standard. It's supposed to make everybody, physically fit.
What standard? Like the walk to Walmart to buy Oreos standard?
Well, that's what and people are going to hate me, but going back to what we started at, is that because the chicks are in combat roles now?
Yes.
I think is that partly because they're trying to lower the standards so that the female counterparts don't get absolutely shamed out of PT?
We kind of got into that with Kaylee.
It's hard to say. We have a couple infantry women that are now getting integrated into our unit. There are some that can outperform a lot of the men. There are some. There are some that can't even meet the standard that definitely got pushed through because they wanted to make the numbers look good. But this isn't just a female problem. That's a problem with the men as well. There are a lot of really fucking fat men and a lot of really unfit men. They don't have to be fat, just unfit men that get pushed through. And we're in the infantry, so we're expected to be in good shape, that get pushed through, and they are just physically incapable of doing their job. And I get it all the time. Back when I was actually doing my job, I would get soldiers fresh out of basic training that were unable to do a single pull-up. Now, I get it. This isn't the fucking Marine Corps. I get it. It's not the Marine Corps. We don't do pull-ups. It's not on our tests. We don't focus on doing pull-ups. But you can never train pull-ups in your life, and if you're a decently fit person, you don't have to be fucking yoked. You don't have to be like the best person in cardio, but if you're a decently fit person, you could knock out at least one pull-up. But there's men and women that are getting pushed through for different reasons, but it's wrong altogether.
Well, I'll say this about law enforcement, and also just so I don't get canceled for my previous comments. I think that there's women out there that are absolute fucking studs. There was a couple ladies at the office that I worked at that could absolutely kick my ass and kill me with a toothpick. But those are very much the outlier, right? The problem is that, as you said, we also have a bunch of dudes that also shouldn't be there. So I'm a huge fan of, I don't care what your plumbing is, can you do the job? And if you have a standard set that will weed out the fat dudes and the chicks that shouldn't be there, you'll end up with a few chicks that are absolutely kick-ass, and you'll end up with a bunch of dudes that are kick-ass, right? That's just the demographics. That's what data shows us. So I think, as you said, it's a multifaceted problem. It's not because of women being in the Army. Don't cancel me, bro. But I think that the changing standard, probably that contributes to it. And also, as you said, they don't want to lose a bunch of dudes that they have filling spots.
Yeah, and there's a lot, if we want to talk about, women in combat roles, there's a lot
I really don't.
Yeah.
But
on the topic of physical fitness, I don't think that is necessarily always a valid criticism. I think there are much more other valid discussion points to be brought up when talking about women in combat roles. Whatever side you're on, be it for or against, I think there are much more valid points to bring up before you start bringing up physical fitness. Just because if we, like you said, if we have that standard, that problem's solved. If we have that standard, it's not enough because you have to enforce it. The problem is it's not getting enforced on both sides. So a lot of people are slipping through for different reasons. You have people getting pushed through just for being a woman. You have people getting pushed through just because the Army needs numbers. And it's really detrimental to the readiness of units and squads that are, preparing to go to combat. I think there are different requirements for different jobs. For example, there's, paper pushers at law enforcement agencies, but there's also the appearance aspect. If you look like a fat, lazy piece of shit and you're a cop, or if you look like a fat, lazy piece of shit and you're a soldier, well, now you're just making the entire organization look bad. It doesn't matter what your job is because people don't know what your job is. But especially in combat arms or where you're actually out and, doing whatever the fuck you're doing, you need to be, like I said, you don't need to be fucking huge. You don't need to be running marathons, but you need to be in decent physical shape. And I don't know how to necessarily measure that and actually enforce that because it seems like they spend millions and millions of dollars trying to do it and they suck at it. So I don't know what the answer is, but
they spend millions of dollars making a pin right in space. I mean, the government will piss away money on anything.
Literally anything.
Yeah. So like that hammer that was purchased for Congress, it was like $50,000 because it had to touch so many hands for the money to get where it needed to be. Give that a Google if you've never heard of that.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
The hospital mugs that cost $1,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all that to say, the world would be much better if the three of us ran it.
Yes.
I wouldn't run it. I'd
Two
step
rules.
back from that
Rule
instantly.
1, no pants. Rule 2, dog hats, mandatory.
Well, I'm already living the no pants life.
Hell yeah.
You may not know it, but I'm living it right now.
There you go. You're one step ahead.
So is that problem present in the Canadian military as well?
Pants or
Pants,
yes, very much so.
All the things plaguing, the American armed forces and police.
From what I can tell, yes. Almost everyone I know who's currently serving or was serving or anything like that says basically the same thing, which are a majority of people are out of shape, don't meet any physical standard, can't shoot for shit, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's what looks good on paper versus reality. And you have, people who are 50, 75 pounds overweight and, requal once a year, even though they're in a combat arms role because, the budget for ammunition has dropped just so incredibly. And no one, again, it's the retention problem too. They're trying to treat retention problems by dumbing down the forces in general. And exactly like you were saying, they don't want people to leave. It's negative growth. But in turn, this constant lowering of standards and making it, appealing for the lowest common denominator is making the people who are actually good at their jobs leave. And I think it's like that in the military, and I think it's like that in law enforcement here. And from my friends in both fields, they echo much the same thing.
Yeah, that's part of why our slogan at Orion is challenge the status quo, because there seems to be this status quo of mediocrity kind of ever present, at least in, maybe it's just Western society, but in anything martial or armed, there seems to be sort of this like protect my pension, protect my job sort of vibe. And people aren't putting the actual people, of course, the people below them, leaders aren't serving people below them. They're trying to keep their pension, keep their job. And that's creating a culture of I don't even know how to quantify it in one word, but it's causing people that actually give a shit to leave because they're not being rewarded, or at least they're not being treated the way that you would treat someone when you want to retain them when they work hard.
Yeah. And what you're left with when those people leave are a whole bunch of people who you really don't want to be, carrying a gun and enforcing the law.
They're
What
the
you
ones
get
that are actually
afterward-
fucking up.
Yeah, what you get afterwards are people who fuck it up, people who will pull you over and check out the emissions coming out of your tailpipe,
Oh,
give you a
dude.
ticket for it.
The amount of DMs I had that were like, he's just doing his job.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
Oh my fucking god!
So people listening that didn't know, and for Mitch, if you hadn't see that, it was a motorcycle cop in California pulls over this guy who's in a modified vehicle, and he's got a muffler, an exhaust system. I'm not a car dude, and it's putting out too much, I guess, emissions, exhaust, whatever. When I had posted that video in my story and was like, this dude needs to turn in his badge, I got a bunch of replies basically saying, no, he's doing his job. It's the law, So anyway.
Yeah, basically in the video, he pulls the guy over, tells him, rev your engine to so-and-so and so, measures his emissions, and then tells him, all right, you have to go get your emission certificate. Here's a ticket and a fine, which you have to pay. If you come out again without passing this emissions standard, we're going to arrest you.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's what the Founding Fathers wanted. California's a lost cause, and if it fell into the ocean, I would not cry.
Yeah, I would stand by that. Fuck California. I'm sorry, anyone listening to this who
get out now while you have time.
Yeah, it's not wrong. Fuck California. Okay, so let's go back into your history a little bit though. Before you were a cop, before you were were you a cop and then on SWAT, or were you just straight to SWAT?
No, most places, unless you have some sort of SOF background, are going to take you straight into SWAT. I did get on it early. That's a different story, but I did have to do patrol first.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So before you're a cop, before you're SWAT, before you started posting memes and left, what were you doing as a kid? Were you into sports? Did you get into guns as a kid?
I actually know this one. It's really quite fascinating.
Nathan is like, ooh, my favorite.
Yes.
Yeah, so I grew up basically in the swamp in Louisiana. We have 100 acres of swampland that backs up to a river, and I was homeschooled 1st through 5th grade. So basically it was get up early in the morning, have a little bedroom inspection, have some black coffee with dad, read the Bible, do your homework, do your schoolwork till like noon, and then go play outside until dad got home. And then we had dinner and we read the Bible again and we went to sleep. And it was a blast. I had a great childhood. We learned fieldcraft and stuff from our dad and hunted every weekend that we could and went camping all the time and just played in the woods, and it was awesome. And then went to a real school, not a public school, but a small private school. Went to a different one for high school that was very secular. So I got a lot of opportunity to kind of challenge my beliefs and talk to people that hadn't been raised in a bubble like I had. And that was very formative for me. And then I went to LSU, Louisiana State University, or if you're down here, it's LSU, and got a degree in international trade and finance, which I've yet to use for anything, but it's something that fascinates me, economics. And then I applied in my senior year there to the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office, which is where I got hired after I got out of college.
Somehow I didn't know about the economics part, and it kind of explains a lot about your some of your particular views.
Yeah, it probably explains some of the fiscally conservative leanings. Actually knowing how money works and that it doesn't grow on fucking trees, Joe Biden.
No, it comes out of printers.
Yeah.
Easy. You just make more of it. That's never backfired.
How's it going, people? This is BR here, the producer of the Art and War podcast, to tell you about the Lads Patreon. Not only do we want to continue improving the quality of what we can do both here on the show and on Instagram, but we also want to elevate what we can do as a team. We are looking at pursuing some life-changing goals like acquiring property together and expanding what we can do massively in the future. It's a lofty goal, but one we want to include our audience in to let you know where your greatly appreciated support is going. But what's in it for you? Our Patreon subscribers enjoy 5 different tiers of exclusive perks, ranging from all of the content the lads would post on a pre-Zuckerberg Instagram, downloadable high-resolution guides, behind-the-scenes info like guest schedules, spicy memes, and at our highest tier, get monthly art commissions created by Nathan himself. You can find our Patreon via the link in this episode's description, or in the Seaburn Art Page's bio on Instagram. Now let's get back to Jared from Orion Training Group.
So you grew up kind of, Louisiana's considered the South, but it's like
it's the deep
when you
South.
say that, yeah. So you grew up down there. You grew up doing swamp shit with the what are the people in the swamps? What are they called in Louisiana?
Well, there's a few words for it. If you're thinking of Cajun, that is what I am. Cajun French. So my grandparents did not speak English at first. They
Oh, I fucking hate the French. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's different. We got kicked out of France in the 1600s for gun smuggling.
Oh, so you're cool French.
Yeah, we got kicked out actually to Canada. So I'm probably Nathan's cousin of some kind of way. But yeah, we got kicked out of France to Canada, kicked out of Canada by England when they took over, and then down into Louisiana. And that was in, I think, like the, 1700s ish. At that time, it was a colony. So we were there from the Spanish to the French to the English to America, I think is the order it goes. I don't know. I need to brush up on that. But all that to answer your question, there's a lot of names for people that live in the swamp. But my dad's side is Cajun French.
So you grew up swamp man, Cajun, went to LSU.
You just say swamp man.
Swamp man. Yes, swamp man.
Swamp man.
I'll send y'all some pictures of it later. Yeah, my backyard is literally like cypress trees with the moss and the water, and we'd find alligators back there and stuff growing up. Yeah,
that actually sounds kind of amazing.
It's awesome. Yeah, our house is on 12 feet up on piers because it floods back there.
Holy shit!
So you did all that. You went to LSU.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up joining law enforcement?
I'd been around cops my whole life because my dad was one. He was in the Air Force, which in the Cold War of the 80s, he was part of whatever base SRT was called back then. And then he was a cop, a volunteer cop, which down here you can be a fully commissioned officer and just not get paid and go out whenever on your free time, whenever you want, and just kind of ride in someone else's car and help out, which is super cool. That's what I do now, actually, at the same department that he did that at. So, yeah, he did that for 8 years. So I was always around cops. You know, we grew up watching movies growing up. It was like if it wasn't about Jesus or killing Nazis or John Wayne, we didn't watch it. So it was all like action movies, violence, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing with any sex in it because that's wrong. But blowing people's faces off for Christ is cool. So we did that. We did a lot of that. Watching Nathan trying to choke. Yeah, so a lot of that. So growing up, it was always, you know, like we grew up around guns. We had family traditions of, you know, you get a pistol, your first pistol at 13, you get a semi-auto at 18, you get a rifle and this kind of stuff. So just grew up around guns, grew up around cops, always wanted to do the SWAT thing. Started off wanting to do it at a federal level because I didn't know what I didn't know back then.
Gross.
Yeah, ew. Yeah, I wanted to do FBI, SWAT, and then I realized that they're 99% of the time they're desk jockeys. No offense, guys, but
I mean offense. He doesn't, but I do.
Yeah. Well, my joke is that FBI stands for famous but incompetent.
Oh God.
Yeah. So.
Oh, the FBI agents listening to this aren't going to like.
Yeah.
That.
The guy that listens to me probably hates himself because I'm like, how many mass shooters did you interview and let go today, and then blame it on someone else?
Oh, you only have one? I have two.
So yeah, I went to, that's actually one of the ways I started hanging out / talking to my wife. We met in high school and she wanted to be an FBI profiler, but that's a different story.
Also gross.
Yeah. Yeah. She doesn't do that though. No worries. So then I actually talked to some FBI agents and talked to some local SWAT guys, and the FBI SWAT guys were like, we're really lame. And the local guys were like, this FBI is really lame. So I kind of got the message. And I went with a local department that had a really good team, that had a good reputation, kind of as a premier team in the state, if not the best team in the state. And so that's why I picked it.
So you started as a patrol cop, and then you ended up doing the SWAT stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What happened then? Wait, can you talk about it?
Yeah.
If we can't talk about it, it's fine.
No, we can talk about it. I mean, it's all for the most part. All the court cases are done. Yeah. No. So I started in patrol, which is a clusterfuck. You're basically a secretary with a gun, right? Most of law enforcement's just taking reports that will never go anywhere. So I started off in it's called Scotlandville, which is basically North Baton Rouge. I was one of 2 white guys at the substation out of like 50 people that were all African American, and then 99% of the neighborhood's all African American. So and this is true, all right, this is straight up the truth. I really did not meet or talk to a black person for any length of time until I was in college. Because the town I'm from is
Louisiana?
Yeah, the town I'm from is mostly white folks, and I was homeschooled. So like I hung out with my brother and sister, you know, for the first 11 or 12 years of my life. And then the private schools I went to had like 1 or 2 black people there. And that's just facts of life. Now, we weren't raised with any sort of racism, obviously, at all, but it was culture shock for me to go to a substation. We call it a substation. A lot of people just call it a precinct, but a substation that was 99% black folks with black culture. And that's something that I was like, I'm a white dude that listens to like,
You're Acadian, you don't count.
Yeah, well, maybe not. Yeah, and then the other half of me is Sicilian, so even they don't think I'm white over there in Europe. We're the Mexicans of Europe. But anyway, it was just culture shock for me, right? And I learned a ton. I had a blast. Made some really good friends. Got into 2 shootings in the first 6 months I was there.
Holy shit!
In that department, in that area.
Oh, Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, Baton Rouge is actually has higher murder rate per capita, or it did for 3 or 4 years, than Chicago. It's pretty hairy. I think we've actually broken the record like 3 years in a row, our own record. So I think we'll be over 160 murders just in the capital area this year.
Holy shit! I think like the record for my area was like 14 in a year, and that's I think the entire province.
And that's per capita. So at one point it was higher than Chicago's per capita, which of course is per 1,000, so per 100,000.
Holy shit!
Yeah, so pretty hairy area to work, but because of being in those 2 incidents and being with a guy who was on SWAT that could vouch for me, he was like, this kid's not a pussy. We need to get him on SWAT. He's fit and he can shoot and all that kind of stuff. And so I spent a couple months training up for that, tried out, passed selection on the first go, and then ended up on SWAT.
So now we're at the SWAT level. Before we get to that, though, I relate a lot to how you ended up where you ended up, because I ended up in the Army, airborne infantry. I was going to go and be a ranger. That didn't work out. And very similar story. My stepfather was a cop. He just retired as a sheriff. My mom is a probation officer. My grandfather is he was a local town judge. He got fired. My uncle is a New York State police, defense attorney. I have all these people involved in law enforcement at a local level. And I was either going to end up law enforcement or the military. And I picked the military. And it wasn't until, a couple of years ago, where my stepfather had retired, where I was just talking to him, just kind of now we're finally, because I joined right out of high school. I joined at 17. So I never had that man-to-man, where when you have that experience, as a kid, maybe you're 14 and you sit down, you have that conversation with your dad and you're like, okay, he treats me like a man now. I mean, I had stuff like that, but never where I was actually a grown man adult where I got to sit down with him until a couple of years ago. This is after my deployment. We were talking about law enforcement, comparing the bureaucracy, just comparing. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that this shit was all fucked? You wouldn't have believed me. You had to find out yourself. And I'm like, why did you do it? He's like, well, I had a family. And you just got to keep doing what you're doing when you're, that close to retiring, to take care of your family. It's all you know. Everybody joins law enforcement or the military with great intentions. And the good ones either leave or realize that it's hard to uphold those good intentions that you joined with because of everything surrounding it. And they just try and shuffle through and get done as soon as they can. And
you make me cry, bro. Jeez.
That was my moment that I had with him a couple of years ago after my first deployment. Have you had a moment like that where you came to terms and you're like, I wanted to do good and I can't do good?
Yep, verbatim. So first, my dad is a very wise man. We're very close. And generally, he has been right about most things. Not everything. Dad, if you're listening, sorry I said the F word. But also, he told me the exact same thing. Whenever I was like, Dad, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go be a SWAT guy. And he was like, look, buddy, you'll do it for 5 or 6 years. You'll either love it and just keep going, or you'll end up realizing that a lot of it is BS and you'll end up wanting to do something else. And I was like, nah, I'm going to be there for 30 years, maxed out my retirement contributions. So then I got out, and part of the reason I got out is because he was able to provide an awesome semi-part-time job for me that matched my salary, which is ironic because you work 90 hours a week in law enforcement, actually busting your ass, not getting paid overtime at that department, and then you can work part-time doing the easiest job in the world and make more money. Yeah, so I had a moment that made me want to leave. or 3 or 4 that I ignored because I was comfortable where I was, and I wanted to do the cool stuff. I wanted the adrenaline and the status and all the cool gear. And of course, there's the brotherhood with the teammates. I mean, I think about those dudes every fucking day. Text some of them reply, some of them don't, but it's a big machine, man. It keeps going whether you're there or not. They don't actually fucking need you, 1 or 2
That's
of them
hard to
keep up.
accept.
Oh my God, is it? Yeah.
It's really hard to accept.
Yeah. So some guys that I were really close to made some decisions that put my life at risk on an operation, in outside of their lane of decision making, in my opinion. That if it had not gone exactly correctly as it did, I probably would have been the one that got shot. And in debriefing, it was said, well, if you'd have messed it up, the decision that was made was overruled me as the guy that was doing the breach. And the decision, the explanation was, well, if you'd have messed it up, it had been on me. I'd have personal liability as the
Yeah,
commander.
but you would have been fucking dead.
Yeah, and I said, so your personal liability comes before my safety. And it was kind of like crickets. And then the other person in charge stood up for him and was like, oh, you made the right decision. And everybody there knew it was fucked up. Other people in positions of leadership were like, no, that's fucked. And I ended up turning my stuff in 2 or 3 days later. And that wasn't really the decision that wasn't the thing that made me do it. It was just the last straw in a series of realizing that we're not really doing much to protect people or serve people. We're mostly collecting money. Even at the SWAT level, that is true. So if you go Google, BRPD, they're in a world of shit right now, and that's the sister department for East Baton Rouge, because a bunch of their narcotics teams now disbanded, and they had one of the larger narcotics teams in the state. But what people don't realize, and for people listening to this, I know a lot of your listeners are pretty leery of cops, but a lot of narcotics work is funded by the drug money they take. So you're able to keep actually a large portion of it. So just for example, if we're on a narcotics task force with the federal government and we seize $500,000, we keep a percentage of that as a department, and we can spend it on whatever we want.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So what does that do? Y'all,
New MRAPs, 300 Blackout SIG MCXs.
Now remember, I'm the economics guy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, holy shit, 90% of our work is narcotics related. Yeah, 90% of our work is narcotics related. We have a DEA presence for a task force. We even have an ATF liaisons, right? So we were doing a joint op with BRPD one time, and we have a fake camera that's watching the house, and it's like, why do we keep watching cars come and go? Aren't they going to sell out of heroin? And one of the guys who was running the op, who's now been arrested for malfeasance 5 years later, was like, well, if he sells out, that's more money. So we're letting the heroin that's killing people onto the street so that I can go risk my life being a primary breacher, which is the most dangerous job on the SWAT team, other than the first guy through the door, which also I volunteered for a lot because I don't have kids or anything. And that was always a funny discussion. We'll get into that later. And I realized, like, I'm about to go hit this door, and it is literally so that the department can make money. And when you realize that, it's like, what the fuck am I doing? Still fun, still with the guys. I still went and did the hit, right? I had that realization. I still went and said, you know what? You're having a good time. This is what you always wanted to do. Just suck it up.
Well, you rationalize it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a long time too. And it makes it even more difficult when you have to accept that it doesn't matter if you're there or not, somebody else will be.
Correct.
And that was one of the most difficult things I've recently had to overcome, that I physically am unable to do my job anymore. And for the longest time, I'm like, what's going to happen with my squad? What if we deploy? Nobody's going to be able to take care. And you have this confidence in yourself where you're like, I'm the only one that knows these people like this, and everything's going to crumble if I'm not there, which is a very inflated mindset to have, I admit. And once you realize that that isn't the case, and they're going to keep going, and maybe they get a good leader, maybe they get a bad leader, accepting that as yourself, it's kind of like you start doing what you've always dreamt of doing, and you only look at the really cool things that you've done, and you ignore all the bullshit, because that's what you do your entire career as law enforcement, SWAT guy, Army, infantry. I mean, you only focus on the good shit and the cool shit, which is like 2% of the fucking time.
Yeah, you're 100% correct.
And then you have to like rationalize to yourself why it's okay to do it because of that 2% where maybe you are helping and you're doing what you wanted to do with those good intentions. And it's a giant swirling clusterfuck of realization that like you're not doing any of the things that you wanted to do. You are not necessary. You are very expandable. And the people around you and above you and below you all know you and they are expandable, but it's something that you ignore. It's one of those things you rationalize to yourself.
Yep.
And it makes leaving something like that very difficult. But if you are a motivated person like myself and like you are able to take something and go and do something that you want to do, that you get fulfillment from. And I think that's what you were able to do right now with Orion.
Yeah.
You go out and you do the things that you enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. And I really liked teaching while I was there. And that's one of the things I became really passionate about, especially after the realization that actually going out and doing the raids was not necessarily what I thought it was going to be. Then I was like, oh, well, I really enjoyed teaching. So teaching at SWAT school and then teaching breaching, went to a lot of breaching schools and trained a lot on that. And that was my role the last few years I was there, was the breaching team leader, which sounds cool, but basically you just do the paperwork then and you set up the training day. So that was a lot of fun. And that kind of carried me into wanting to do a training company.
Yeah. Something that I really like about your company is, and the fact that you will train civilians. That's something I think is super important, and I'm really glad you do it, and not a ton of people. And I'm glad that like Gun Culture 3.0 that we've kind of got into before seems a lot more like willing to do that. But for the specific things you're teaching, I'm glad you're doing it. There's not a ton of options, and you do a really good job at it. And publishing the information you do as well.
Now, speaking of who you were training, though, I do want to bring this up because this is something that got brought up to us that I'm kind of curious about. We were told that you, part of Orion Group, trained the ATF. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from. I've had a couple people ask me that, and I have literally no idea where that comes from. So no, we have not done any classes for the ATF, and I doubt they would. Like, why would they seek us out? You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know where that rumor started, but no, I vehemently no, we do not train the ATF. And we even announced that publicly on a live feed one time.
Is it possible that maybe that rumor might come from, because you said there was an ATF division, a part of your unit before, maybe they think that what you're doing now is what you were doing then?
Well,
I mean, I'm trying to figure out their mindset now. That might be it, because you know, if you're coming, I mean, I have no reason to believe that you're lying. I don't think that you would.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, it would be dumb.
Your views are pretty.
You know.
Yeah, no. I understand what y'all are saying, and just to kind of recap, with my team, it was used by a lot of federal agencies because it had the fastest response time in the state as far as spin up. We prided ourselves on a 1-hour response. So, like, for example, one time the FBI had a Aryan Nation guy that had escaped custody and robbed a bank and was held up in a hotel and in a motel. They were like, hey, we need you to get this guy. We don't have time to spin up our regional team. They're in New Orleans. It'll take 5 hours. You know, we were there in 30 minutes and had the guy in custody. And that's really appealing to a federal agency. So the department has an ATF task force. So there are 2 or 3 deputies that are assigned to work with the ATF. And when they would develop a case for an armed suspect that was local to Baton Rouge and the ATF would take it over, they would send our team rather than calling up a ATF regional team or doing what we call an ad hoc task force raid, which is notorious for getting people killed because they don't know what they're doing. So they would rather call a professional team out to do a surround and call out. So that was our function with the ATF. I can think of maybe 6 or 7 in 6 years, and 5 years that we actually functioned on. But no, we never had an ATF person come through a training course at our department that I know of or that I trained personally. And I have never trained anyone in our capacity as Orion that serves with the ATF to my knowledge, unless they slipped in somewhere.
And the internet has a habit, especially like the gun world, of making nasty little rumors that there's not a lot of weight to.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Task Force Doomer, is why I brought it up to let you clear that air, because, even if, let's say, you've done raids for the ATF, right?
And
It
I
doesn't
freely
matter.
admit that I have been on those. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that doesn't matter because of what you're doing now. I mean, you can look back on it, certainly, and reflect on it. I mean, I look back and reflect on my deployments as well. I was essentially going out there and harassing brown people that were just trying to live on the side of a mountain. And I mean, in some cases it was ISIS-K, and maybe you can justify that a little bit, but there's a lot of people that start out doing something like we talked about with the best intentions, and you rationalize to yourself through a lot of the things that you didn't, join to do. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you move forward from it. And what you're doing now, I mean, I think is, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, to hit that nail on the head, one of the incidents that really motivated me to leave. First of all, we'll go into some technical breaching data. All right. So a class 2 metal door is a door that is made of certain materials and has certain levels of lock and those kind of things. And that's kind of not really important. But it was a class 2 metal apartment door set in a metal frame. Metal frame is inset into the wall. So basically the least possible ideal scenario for a mechanical breach, or a manual breach if you're one of those sticklers out there that thinks mechanical is only a hydraulic tool. Manual meaning using a handheld tools that are non-pneumatic or electric. So me as the breaching team leader is like, all right, we're going to do this warrant for the ATF. The ATF guys are telling us in the briefing that it's for modified weapons that are fully automatic. We're going to do a surround and call out with a breach and hold. In my mind, there's no way in hell I should be standing in front of that door, right? Just from a life-preserving kind of way. Why would I stand in front of? Yeah, well, it's a fatal funnel. Why am I gonna? And I'm gonna wail on this metal door that has a metal lock face, a metal throws into a frame that's inset into the wall. And we knew all this from the beginning. So my recommendation officially to the command staff was we have to do an explosive breach for safety of the team. And the quote was, and you'll see me comment this on stuff, no, you're strong young men, just hit it with a ram.
Oh my God.
Right. And this is coming from a 60-year-old man that hasn't done a raid in 20 years. And when he did do raids, it was when you could still beat black people with mag lights and everybody clapped. So his experience no longer counts, right? So, yeah, sorry, I'm going to get me sidetracked. I'm going to get all fired up.
Get fired up.
Yeah, so we went, all the breachers go get in a huddle, and I'm like, look, guys, they won't let us do explosives. We still have to do this breach, so I'm going to do it because I don't have any kids. And then another guy goes, no, I'm not even married. I don't even have a girlfriend. Let me do it. So you've got a bunch of guys in their 20s that are now hashing out who's got the most to lose so that they can do a breach that we know and we have the capability to do correctly. This is an explosive breaching team. I've done operational explosive breaching before this. So we know it works. We have the ability. We have the tools on hand in the ram's sitting on top of the box that all the explosives are in. It wouldn't take me 5 minutes to pull out a prefab charge and use it. But no, you're a strong young man, use a ram. So we go up there. This cockstrong looking dude looks like fucking Jason Statham, nothing but veins and fucking piss and vinegar. He hits this door 3 or 4 times like an absolute legend, and takes the whole fucking frame out of the wall. Dude's a fucking animal.
Shit. Hell yeah.
I would not have anticipated that much success, and I think if anyone else had been in that position, it wouldn't have happened that way. We end up having to make entry or calling the guy out and then making entry to search, whatever. Turns out at the end of all of it that the ATF had bungled the evidence and he had just been bump firing. And so there was no federal warrant PC at all. Now there was state PC because he'd been firing too close to a residence. So we were still able to save our asses from getting sued. But point being, if I had gotten killed in that breach and my wife had been at my funeral and they would have called me a hero and they would have told her, hey, he was doing the Lord's work and this and that, and it would have been for no fucking reason at all, for an agency that's unconstitutional, and ultimately because an old man that doesn't know what he's talking about said, hit it with a ram. So that played a huge role into me saying, 1, fuck the ATF, and 2, fuck being in full-time law enforcement where nobody gives a shit about your life. As you said earlier, you're completely expendable. That's the dude that'll look you in the eye, shake your hand, tell you he loves you and wants to do everything right for you, and then will send you into a situation knowing it's less than ideal because he doesn't want to have to write the report on an explosive breach. And that's it. That's what it comes down to. And that played a big role in me leaving. It was probably about a year later. roughly, if I remember correctly. And I was just like, you know what, fuck this. Because that was just one time after another where they said, no, do it a different way. Do it how we don't train. Don't follow the SOB because I might be liable. And you have enough of that happen and you're an intelligent person. You're like, holy shit, they don't care if I die.
Yeah.
One thing that I've been doing is I don't know if you get these types of messages, but oftentimes we'll get messages and it'll be like, hey, I'm thinking of joining the Army. What do you think about it? And the
Yeah.
question I always ask, I don't tell them, because I understand I have a biased opinion. I tell them, I'm like, look, everything I'm about to say, I have a very biased opinion, but I want to ask you some questions. All right. Do you trust the people that are currently running the military? No. Okay. Well, that's one screaming sign. You don't trust the people that you work for. Why don't you trust them? Well, they don't handle a lot of situations very well. They send people in harm's way, and it's often a mistake. Okay, there you go. Number 2, right? You don't trust them, and you see that they are actively being negligent. And these are the people that you are going to go volunteer to work for in a position and a job where life and death is a very real thing. It's a very real thing. And then they're like, yeah, but what about the camaraderie and, the brothers to your left and right, and somebody has to go do it.
It's like you've watched too many movies.
And don't get me wrong, like you said, I still text and talk to a lot of the guys that I deployed with, especially my squad. Talk with a lot of them. There's some I don't. But at the end of the day, for as great friends as I've had and as many shitty people that I've met in the military, it is no different than if I were to go and just find a couple friends and just go starting out and being more safe, more productive, getting good proper training, and going out and hanging out with some friends. You can form these bonds and relationships without, they say suffering creates friendships, and hardships create friendships.
Yeah, it's the same reason frat guys sodomize each other. It's because it makes them like each other, right? Yeah.
It's just bonding, bro.
Yeah,
it's a very weird culture that people fetishize, and then they get into it, and much like myself, much like yourself, you get into it, you do it, you rationalize to yourself for however long that you can manage, and then all of a sudden you're just like, this is fucking awful.
Yeah. And they work you to death because they don't care. So they don't care about you. That's another big reason to leave. And then military, what is the pay for a private? It's like $13 an hour.
No, it's less than that.
Yeah,
we did the math. It's significantly less than that. The benefits on paper look great. Can tell you from firsthand experience, the benefits fucking suck. The medical care is terrible. The pay is awful. I think private makes because the first year, $100. So people always talk about, college. Oh, the GI Bill's great. GI Bill's great. You pay into that. People don't talk about that. You pay into that. Like, you don't get free food. You pay $300 a month for food.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's automatically taken out of your paycheck, and even if you don't use it.
So let's say we have mess dues, had mess dues, but they weren't nearly that bad. Like, that is something awful.
Yeah, so we have the dining facility, the DFAC, and whether you go to it or not, let's say you go out, you buy groceries, you want to make your own food, that $300 and some odd dollars still gets taken out of your paycheck whether you use it or not. And then your GI Bill, you pay $100. I think it's $100, maybe a little more, for your GI Bill for the first year of your service. So you're subtracting right there $400 from your pay, and it's subject to tax, and you're not getting paid too much to begin with. I think when the only reason I made more money was because I was stationed in Europe for my first little bit, and you get what's called COLA, cost of living allowance, so I got paid a little bit more. But a private, like an E1, E2, brand new private, fresh out of basic training, stationed in the U.S., they're making like $600-700 every 2 weeks, so $1,400 a month. It's not a lot of fucking money. And it doesn't get much better. I mean, it does. That's why you have a lot of people getting married, because you get paid a fuck ton more when you get married. A lot more.
No, I didn't realize that. I just thought it was like what you had to do. You get the Mustang for 29% APR.
No.
Huh. Yeah.
That is such a real stereotype. That's come up a few times, I think.
It annoys me because I have soldiers that are the stereotypical worst soldier of all time. Like, a lot of people make memes about like, oh, got a Mustang at a 29% APR. It happens, and it happens so often. And there's a reason that stereotype exists, because it's so prevalent. I think Nathan, I was telling you and our production manager the other day about the soldier that I had that was almost ruined my career because he lied to my platoon sergeant
Yes,
about me.
you mentioned that.
Yeah, so
Lied about you.
yeah, Jared, you're entering the segment where we do my most favorite thing, and that's self-masturbation and talking about myself on the podcast. But we'll get back to you. We'll get
Every
back to you
time.
as soon as this is done, I promise. There was this soldier that I had. I'm going to tell you how I met him. I show up to Carson. They assigned me to be a squad leader, and I meet my platoon sergeant. Everybody else is on leave. And then a week later, my platoon sergeant's like, hey, you got this new soldier. Okay, great. Go up and introduce myself to him, initial counsel him. I talk to him. I'm getting to know him. We're leaving work that day. He pulls me aside. He's like, hey, Sergeant, can I talk to you? Yeah, absolutely, man. What's up? I'm getting married. What? When? Today. What? Why? To who? To your baby mama, because he had gotten the girl pregnant. And I was like, oh, to your baby mama. I'm trying to rationalize this in my head. I'm like, okay, so he's marrying the person he got pregnant. He's taking responsibility. He's like, no, a different girl. And I'm like, what the fuck?
What?
Who? And he's like, she's living with an E8 right now. And I'm like,
Oh no!
this is just getting worse. And I'm like, getting married today to somebody that is living with an E8 who is not your baby mama? He's like, yeah, roger that, son. I'm like, no, you're not. This is a bad idea. And so this is how I met this guy. Fast forward through a whole bunch of other incidences. I'm sure I'm going to get to talking about in the future on more episodes, but to make this a little bit shorter,
Piece of shit.
Well, to add to this, he's 27 years old and didn't have his driver's license, but that's neither here nor there. Completely different. So this is when I was a NCOIC for Buddy Team Live Fires at Cadet Summer Training in Fort Knox, Kentucky. Came with me as part of the early deployed there, just to go set up and get established with his job. So I was gone all day building a range for cadets, and I come back and an E8 ironically comes up to me and is like, hey, is your soldier? I'm like, yeah, roger that. He's like, well, he didn't show up to work today. What? He only has one responsibility, and that's to show up in full battle rattle. He's literally a demo as a person. He just has to stand there in kit, and the cadets look at him and like, okay, this is everything that I need to be wearing. That is his only job, to stand there in kit. So I go up to him like, why weren't you at work? I couldn't find my kit. Like, what do you mean you couldn't find your kit? Like, well, where's your kit? So I did kit drills with him. Took him 44 and a half minutes to get into full battle rattle. 44 and a half fucking minutes. I'll never forget it. So I start doing kit drills with him, and I'm living in an open bay with a bunch of other NCOs, like 30 or 40 other NCOs. We get 3 minutes into him doing push-ups for taking 44 and a half minutes after doing kit drills. And he gets up, and it pissed me off too because he was tall. He was fucking taller than me, and it pissed me off. He gets up, and I'm like, Thompson, what the fuck are you doing? He looks over my head, pissed me off even more, scrunches his stupid little fucking face up, and is like, no, Sergeant. And I was like, excuse me? And this is in a bay full of other NCOs back when I really cared about my job. And somebody grabbed me, pulls me away, is like, get the fuck out of here. I'm about to lose my mind. So I just text my platoon sergeant after I've cooled off a little bit. I'm like, look, I'm not dealing with this guy. Hey sergeant, just letting you know this is what happened. This is what I did. I put it on paper, blah, blah, blah. Good to go. Okay, I'll be there in 3 days. We're going to talk. Sounds great. Easy. I didn't want to see him. I didn't see him, didn't talk to him. I just made sure he showed up to work, and that was it. I couldn't bear being near him anymore. My platoon sergeant shows up, and he calls and me up there, and he's like, "Hey, sergeant, I want to talk to alone. You just step out for a minute." Okay, no problem. I step out. I get called in.
Wait, Mitch, I don't know if you care. You just fucking doxed yourself.
What? Yeah,
you just said your last name.
I don't care.
Okay.
People know
just worth saying. I don't know if you ever done it.
Yeah. So I get called back in, and the platoon sergeant, he's like, do fucking push-ups to me. And I'm like, okay, roger that. Not going to question it. Don't know what I did. Just start doing push-ups. Good soldier. I'm counting 1, 2, 3. He's like, wait a minute. Get the fuck up. You do push-ups. And he looks at me. He's like, he told me that you were drinking and drunk when you were smoking him. But then I remembered that you don't even drink. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't drink. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's like, I was about to ruin your entire fucking career and kick you out of the Army. And I'm like, no, I don't drink. So the fact that my platoon sergeant knew that I didn't drink at the time is what saved my entire career from it becoming a he said, she said about drinking. And
Holy shit.
anyways, I have so many other stories about this soldier, but I can't fucking stand this guy. I don't even know how we got on the subject of this guy, but I hate him. I hate him. But
I
there's
think
people.
it's just us ranting about all the dumb shit we've experienced.
Yeah, probably.
Like, I'll give you a 5-second one, okay? Chick got promoted over me. She really is a nice lady. Awful as a cop. Got promoted over me for various reasons, and like 6 months later said the most embarrassing shit in court. So bad that she got swung out of patrol entirely.
Like what sort of shit?
I'm not sure the exact way to describe that in this podcast, but to my knowledge, the judge then called the sheriff after the court case and was like, holy shit, never let that person testify again.
Holy shit.
And so like the next day, gone. And that kind of thing happens at sheriff's offices, because at a sheriff's office down here in Louisiana, and I don't know where Mitch is at, and I don't know how it is in Canada, but the sheriff in Louisiana, because Louisiana's constitution is Napoleonic law, we have a totally different type of code. The rest of America has common law. We have Napoleonic code. If it's written down in legislation, it's the law. Otherwise, fuck it, right? In the law, the sheriff is the premier law enforcement authority in his parish, and nobody can tell him shit. The only person that can arrest a sheriff is the coroner. Explain that to me. So the sheriff says, yeah, you're not in patrol anymore. Like that, boom, you are not in patrol anymore. And there's nothing else. There's no union. It's just the sheriff said. And that's how it goes. That's where the kiss-assery comes from, because it all rolls downhill.
Shit. I hate that. I hate how it's rewarded. I hate how both kiss-assing and ineptitude are rewarded in droves in any like
yes
official government position, be it military, law enforcement, or even as a civil servant.
Yeah. What'd you say, Mitch?
You're not encouraged to do the right thing. If you do the right thing, you're likely going to be chastised for it, because it makes your leadership look bad if you do the right thing and they don't do the right thing before you do. It's such an awful culture. And I really try and be careful. Oh, we were talking about this because I brought up how people ask me about joining the military. Do people ask you about, joining SWAT or cops?
Yes.
They do?
A lot. Yeah, I get a lot of DMs like, I want to be a cop. What's your advice? I'm like, don't do it. Or I'm like, if you're going to do it, here's all the questions you need to ask, and here's all the research you need to do. And it's basically like how to find the perfect department. Psych, you won't.
Yeah, we were bitching about the military and law enforcement and how you shouldn't do it. And if you do your research and try to completely understand what you're getting into before you get into it, which I think that, like we were talking about when I had my dad or my stepdad tell me, he's like, you wouldn't have listened to me. It's very true. I was a stubborn young man. I wouldn't have listened to him. I probably would have wanted to do it even more if he said, hey, don't do it. But so coming from all that experience, having that realization, leaving that job, what made you then start Orion?
So that's kind of a multifaceted story. What literally made me start it was, so there's the Instagram account, The Boy from Illinois. You probably have seen it at some point or another. He loves y'all's content. Great guy. We're really, really good friends now. I just spent the whole weekend with him in Pennsylvania at the Green Beret Foundation charity event. We flew together, drove, and everything. Anyway, he's a great dude. Love him to death. And I'm sure he's listening, so, shout out. But anyway.
Boy from Illinois.
Yeah, shout out the Boy from Illinois. There you go. So he posted, I deleted all my SWAT-related social media. I had a pretty big account with 8,000 followers that I posted pictures of cool gear and stuff on, and I deleted all that shit. And I just had this little rinky-dink 100 follower account where I just posted food and stuff. Still have it. And I followed him because we had followed each other for quite some time on this other account. He posted some video of him and his friends doing a vehicle stop, a high-risk vehicle takedown where you drag somebody out of the car. And it was all fucked up. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. And he knows this, obviously. So I messaged him and was like, look, dude, I don't know who you are, what you do. You post cool stuff here and there, but that was really fucked up. And if you guys really are doing this kind of thing in real life, if you're cops or something, can I give you some pointers, holy shit. And he was like, man, we were just making a cool video for fun. But yeah, come show us how to do it. So we exchanged some videos of me showing him how to do stuff. And
you're good at those.
Yeah. Well, that's how it started. It was with it was sticky notes. I cut up sticky notes and drew a car and stuff, and just took the time to explain it. And he was like, "Man, that makes so much sense. Holy shit! You want to come teach a class up here?" And I was like, "I mean, if you pay for my gas, yeah." So I drove up to Illinois. He had a bunch of his friends that were in the video, and we did basically the first small unit CQB. This was November of last year. Orion did not exist at the time. And it was just it was like 5 or 6 dudes, and it was really, really good time. His parents are like something straight out of Louisiana, just salt of the fucking earth, sweetest people. I slept in their basement with like all the boys down there. They have like a team room. His mom cooked food for us and everything. It was super wholesome. Like I could cry thinking about it right now. And it really invigorated me because I hadn't done anything related to anything in July. Like 3 months. I left in July that year, and then 3 months later was teaching this class and was like, oh my God, I need to do this. I had talked about before leaving law enforcement, I really want to run a training company. And I'd have been told, man, don't jump straight into it. Find another job first, which is what ended up happening. So anyway, I go up there, I do this class, and it really kind of ignites a passion for teaching again, which is something I had told you guys earlier I was really passionate about, both from helping teach at SWAT schools and running breaching training. And so a lot of the guys at this class, some of them are really squared away dudes. Some guys from the Army, a guy who does some counter-terror stuff, were like, man, this was a really good course for something you like hip-pocketed for 2 days. You should do a training company. And it was a lot of affirmation for me, right? I was like, holy shit, this went really well. I should try this. And that's really how it started. I went and filed for an LLC, got a website, reopened an old Instagram account I had from the Breacher Up days, which is a different story. It was the old Breacher Up account that hadn't been used in 2-3 years. I just logged in, updated all the info, and started looking for other guys to help me teach that I had been keeping up with for years, people that I knew personally, people I had met through social media, and started pulling all those strings for networking. And fast forward, almost a year now. Next month will be a year, and it's this monster with 32,000 followers and all this business.
How old were you when you entered law enforcement?
21.
21, and that was fresh out of college, right?
Yep.
Something I want to discuss. Nathan and I were going to do a whole podcast about it. We never ended up doing it. Was finding your value outside of military and law enforcement.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
Yeah, because when it becomes your purpose. It becomes you. Like you become and make it your identity.
Oh man,
and
yeah.
When I joined at 17, so that's all I knew ever since I was a kid. And fresh out of college, you're still a kid. You're still a kid. You're young. You're fresh to the world. Some people at 21 are more mature than others, and it's neither here nor there. But you enter in a career that is often defined outside looking in as brotherhood, as all these different unique characteristics, and you let it start defining you. And then when you start leaving that, or getting close to the time where you do leave that, you lose that identity, you lose that self-value, and now you have to find where your value and where you fit in with the rest of the world. And that's something a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people struggle with it. So you were able to find that value in something that you enjoy, that you're passionate about. And not only that, it's something that helps others. And finding that, as soon as you did, it's super unique. And yeah, absolute props to you. That's awesome. I'm really happy you were able to find that for you.
I think that's partially at the risk of sounding kitschy, maybe the will of God, but I think it was a little bit meant to be. It was something that had been on my heart for a long time. That, man, I really enjoy teaching. I like seeing the aha moment. I really enjoy watching people learn and going, wow, that works. I don't know if having that predisposition and knowing that was what I wanted to do for a long time, then going to Illinois and doing that class kind of just ad hoc, kind of hip pocket, really reignited it, or what. It was kind of a weird combination of things. So I don't want to credit myself with that, because I wasn't a bad spot, frankly. I was starting to slip into the depression, if that makes sense. Like you talked about, people get into this kind of rut after they get out of like, who am I? What's my worth? And just looking at it from, because it's not, I wasn't in the military, and I'm never going to be that guy that's like, SWAT's the same thing as special forces. Like, I don't believe that at all. Totally different things. But you got a group of 30 to 35 dudes that our op tempo was super high. You're doing basically a call out every 2, if not every 3 days, high intensity, getting shot at, having been in shootings. You have this bond with these dudes, right? And it's like you tell yourself, like, I'm a hero. You know, people think I'm a hero. Your family tells you you're a hero. Society, at some level, does. You're doing all this cool shit, and this is the other thing. You do all this cool shit that nobody else can do. How many people on U.S. soil are using explosive breaching, flashbangs, have night vision, or riding around in an armored car, kicking doors, blowing shotgun, breaching doors and stuff? All this super, super cool stuff. It's relatively pretty fucking high speed, even compared to what some like infantry guys are capable of, right? For what y'all are training to do. CQB is not your bread and butter. So you have all that status and all that stuff, and literally overnight turn your shit in, and boom, now what do I do with my life? You know,
now you're a felon if you possess explosives.
Right. And I went from driving around with it in the back of my car, you know, able to deploy it against American citizens under a warrant. Of course, it's all justified, but you know, it is what it is, right?
He winked for those who couldn't see it.
I keep forgetting we're not on video. Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's all justified until it turns out it's not. And I have a lot of respect for cops. Obviously, I am one. I still volunteer. I was one in a different capacity, but I think that there has to be a balance. People have to be held accountable for things, and they have to function as they're designed. And part of what happens is when you leave law enforcement, you realize, you almost feel like a second-class citizen. Like, what am I going to do now? You know, I don't have all this cool stuff. Who am I? And I think we need to change. If people change that perception, they wouldn't be willing to sacrifice so much. So just for example, I left my wife at the dinner table 2 different anniversaries. I missed every single one of my mom's birthdays, most Christmases. I worked an average of between 70 and 90 hours a week, despite only being paid for 42 because we didn't make overtime despite being on SWAT. You got a measly little fucking pension, but it doesn't pay anything. When I left, they owed me like 30 grand in unpaid overtime, which of course they had to pay some portion of. So you make all these sacrifices and you burn the candle at 3 fucking ends because you're told you're a hero and you're this and you're that and you get to do all this cool stuff. But then when you get out, you realize, okay, I'm missing my self-worth. I'm missing a huge chunk of my relationship with my wife. I have a sleep disorder. Depending on who you are and what you've been through, you might have some mental issues, PTSD and other stuff. I do have a sleep disorder. Last night I stayed up till 2 a.m. for no fucking reason. Slept great for the last week. All of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, I can't sleep because we worked rotating 2 weeks days, 2 weeks nights. I did that for 6 years. So, you know, you do all this and you sacrifice all this and you feel so much worth from it. And then when you take it away, as you said, well, fuck, now what? What do I have to show for it, you know? So what do you think people could do just to make this a productive conversation, not like, you know, as you said, you know, woe is me. What do you think people can do to actually productively channel that energy into finding something positive?
For me, I had to go back into my childhood to remember what I was passionate about. And then I was able, and I think it was different for me because, like I said, I joined when I was 17. I was still a kid. I was still young and dumb. I still had all these, you know, large goals and aspirations. And then I joined the military thinking I could still do them and realizing that that's just not realistic. So I had to look back into my childhood, and I found soccer. Loved soccer as a kid. Loved soccer as an adult. I played in Italy for a little bit. I say play in the loosest term. I got paid essentially to show up and train and then never touch the field, never even suit up for games. But I got paid a little bit, and it was a great experience. But I look back on that, and I'm like, well, what are you really good at? You're great at teaching. You know, that's something that you learned and developed in the military as a team leader and a squad leader. You're very passionate about soccer, so why not start coaching? So I started volunteering to coach. And I started to do things outside of the military that I was passionate about and that I cared about. And that was able to help realize that I have value as a person, not as a soldier. My value doesn't come from being a soldier. My value comes from me being as a person. I was able to, work for, different professional soccer teams while still in the military, just by scouting, doing talent development, I have a kid very recently that signed his first pro contract.
Hmm. That's cool.
He as a kid, as like a 12-year-old kid, is going to make close to $100,000 for his family, and
Holy shit.
playing soccer. He signed a pro contract.
That is crazy.
That's actually crazy.
And
I'm over here talking shit about sports, but that's awesome.
I love sports. I love all sports, but I'm very passionate about soccer. But
I know sports exist, but
yeah,
hockey.
Me and Mitch are gonna have to fight later. I don't like most sports.
You know what? I'm going to be on your side for that one.
Let me enjoy my bread and circuses. All right.
No, bread and circuses.
Well, for me, sports need to not involve a ball. But anyway, I agree with what you're saying, that you need to go back to your childhood and say, what motivated me when I was young and innocent and enjoyed life? What did I do that I really liked? And that's awesome that you went back to that.
And if you're able to take the experiences that you got and the perspective, that's what I like to talk about, because there's a lot of people that think, oh, I was on some high tier door kicking unit, or I was airborne infantry, or I was Rangers, right? And now I'm certified to do all these things. And you might have the experience of doing them. That doesn't make you a good teacher. Does not make you a good teacher. Does not make you a good instructor.
Bro, you're going to put me on my freaking soapbox with that one. But yeah, you're 100% correct.
I think we talked about this last time, but I pissed off a Green Beret group because I mentioned that. I'm like, look, just because you kicked in mud huts full of, brown people and farmers with AKs and killed them doesn't mean that you're a great instructor. It might mean that you're great at doing CQB, but it doesn't mean you should just start, a training or instruction group, because you can be ass at instructing and great at what you do. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point that I was
teaching is its own ability.
It is. And what that experience does, well, I don't think it's always necessary to be a good teacher. It does give you a very unique perspective that you can teach off of. And I think that is what the experience that you and I have, it's the perspective. And we can take that perspective and take what we're good at. We're good teachers, and then we can teach others and make content digestible for folks. You do it in a much more real setting than, Nathan and myself do. We make guides, we make things more digestible on paper. That's why we're always encouraging people to go out and actually do it. It's very different from reading it on Instagram, going out and doing it. You do the very real portion. We do the very simplistic, digestible way to begin. But I was able to go back into my childhood and take the perspective and experiences of teaching and instruction and combine the two. And, like I said, I work for, I contract out and do scouting and youth talent development for professional teams. And it's something I'm very passionate about, that I enjoy, and that I was able to go back and take something I was very passionate about, rekindle that, and realize that value comes from me being a person. And even if you remove the soldier part, now I at least have that. And I was able to take that. In some ways, even the Instagram page, I have value there. And I also have value working for, Mirror Safety now. I was able to find my value and develop my skills and talent and the perspective that I took from the military and apply it outside of it in a completely different realm and make myself valuable as a person.
Right.
And it seems like you were able to do that too, and in a much more real way of helping people.
Well, I would say that the way that you guys reach people, at the risk of this sounding like a circle jerk, the way that you guys reach people with this medium of comic book kind of Fallout character style stuff is really, really important. We keep joking about like, oh, I'm autistic or whatever, but the way that I learn and the way that I can pick up on information is really impacted by visual aid. And I teach with the adult learning model, which is something I learned from the other instructors when I was on SWAT. But you have to be able to talk about it and then demo it. Once you've demoed it, you have to watch the students do it and critique them as they do it, and then you test them, right? Well, these drawings, which Nathan does so well, and you guys put your heads together for. No, they're awesome.
It's a team effort.
Yeah, so and the three of us have produced 3 y'all's page some pretty cool stuff, and which my wife gets a kick out of how y'all draw my legs. She said my butt's not big enough.
We'll fix that next time.
Yeah, no, I am built like Queen Latifah from the waist down, but all that to say, it really does help people because, and I showed like my older brother my brother-in-law, you guys stuff, and you're like, oh wow, this is all stuff we're really interested in, and it's cool to be able to digest it in an understandable way that has an illustration. I mean, like you've seen the MRE guide, right? A rock or something. It talks about leaning it up, right? Like having an illustration helps some people, a rock or something. Because there was a dude who was like, holy shit, I don't have a rock. What else could I use? I don't know. The diagram doesn't tell me. And so they had to put in there or something. So having you guys illustrations is another medium that I don't know of anyone else that does what y'all do in the way that you guys do it. Having kind of a quirky, unique design style, a unique presentation style, and then reaching out and finding SMEs and stuff that y'all aren't SMEs in, and this and that. It's really, really neat. And not to continually beg, but make a fucking coffee table book, please.
Oh, it's happening. It's
Yeah. Takes time.
It takes time. Like every single guide we do, it's like, all right, here's another thing we can put in. Here's another thing we can put in.
Yeah.
Oh, here's another. But like that.
Well, you can do focus guides,
get,
like you could do a guide on fieldcraft stuff. You could do a guide on CQB. You could do a guide on this, guide on that, guide on that.
Yeah.
And then you can have like the master guide that you just like release a volume of every year that's updated and compounded. Because y'all are putting out all this information for free, which is great. But eventually for all that effort, you need to get something out of it. And I don't know about Patreon. I've never fooled with it. I'm not, I mean, as a casual enjoyer, yeah, feed pics, but I've never gone on Patreon and just like purchased any. So, I don't know how Patreon works. Is it kind of get like an OnlyFans vibe? I don't know. But
yeah,
if you guys
mostly I just put pictures of my butt up there.
But if you guys actually sold a physical book, I think it would do well.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, all that to circle back to what Mitch was saying. Finding something you're good at, that you're passionate about, that is outside the scope of your previous experience, and doing it well is far more important than wearing your grunt style shirt to Walmart and hoping for a discount 24/7.
Yeah,
right.
Grunt style shirt, your paracord bracelet.
Right,
you got your Oakleys on.
Hey man, what do you do for a living? I'm a veteran. What do you do for a living? I used to be a cop. Like all the thin blue line Punisher skulls make me want to blow my brains out.
Yeah, people who turn things into their identity.
Right, and I was guilty of that, especially the first 2 years, because I was 21. I was so fucking gung ho. I had been in some seriously critical incidents that people with, like, no shit, a guy that had 44 years in law enforcement told me I've never really had to pull my gun on anybody. And I was riding with him after the first shooting. And for clarification, I did not shoot on that one. That's a whole fucking long story. Long story short, maybe had the opportunity, decided not to, and ended up providing aid to a victim who was on scene that had been stabbed like 40 plus times.
Holy shit.
And she ended up living. Anyway, that we could do a whole 2-hour podcast just on that incident. But afterward, because of that being involving my field training officer, I got put with some random dude for like a week until they found someone to sub in. And he told me, yeah, I've never really had to pull my gun on anybody in all my years in law enforcement. And then 6 months to the day later, I then actually was in a shooting in which I engaged with my weapon. And then that guy actually on Christmas Eve of that year shot a dude in the head after 44 years and then retired. So after 44 years, finally did the deed and was like, you know what, I've had enough. So I don't even know where I was going with that. We were talking about
finding your value.
Louisiana.
Louisiana. Finding your value. Yeah. So you go through all this and you wear the thin blue line shirt because you're like, yeah, I survived. I'm still waiting to get a Lady Luck tattoo at some point if my wife will let me.
Get it on the thigh.
I'm thinking about getting it on the thigh. Yeah, because I narrowly missed getting shot in the face. I'm actually doing vehicle CQB. Shout out to all the special forces guys that teach that for cops. Oh wait, but yeah, I was. Mitch is like, I'm so confused. I see the look on your face. Yeah, no, that was a totally separate shooting. In which we were in and around a bunch of vehicles, and I had never heard of vehicle CQB and didn't know what I was doing, and almost got my fucking head blown off because I was basically standing out in the open over the top of the hood like I had been taught. So anyway, I ended up going through a department regurgitation of vehicle CQB after Will Petty came down and trained all of our instructors on it. But for that incident, I still was taking cover. Most of the other deputies that were engaged with the multiple hostile parties were just out in the fucking open. One dude was shooting his pistol sideways.
Nice.
Real talk.
Like the deputies?
The deputy, yeah, like
Holy shit.
like skra, the tingo skra.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that to say, it was fucking wild time, and I almost died because I heard that woo noise whenever it goes right by your fucking head.
Holy shit.
It's life changing, isn't it?
Oh, dude, it's incredible. So
It's fucking-
I've drawn. I like to draw. I've told Nate a little bit about this. I love to draw pinup stuff.
Yeah, he's actually really quite good at it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I really would like to get a pinup at some point. My wife thinks pinup tattoos are tacky. Of course, she likes the pinups that I draw, but she's like, I don't know if I want that on your body. Oh, wow, that is really good. For everyone that doesn't know what's going on, Mitch is showing me some of his really nice tattoos.
Yeah, he just
pinups.
like laid back on the couch and spread his legs up in a V shape.
I had to show my calf.
I saw the forbidden starfish. No, yeah.
That's you got to save that for Patreon, Mitch.
Are you talking about my thigh tattoo?
Yeah. What color are your toenails, man? But yeah. So anyway, coming back to the light, I want to draw a Lady Luck pinup. And I've tried a bunch of them, like riding on the bullet of the rotating 9mm, kind of like riding the bomb, the classic ones.
Yeah.
Or like I had one where she's bending down to pick a clover and the bullet's going over her head, like she was lucky she bent down to pick it up.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I might just get Lady Luck. I don't know, as like a word. But I do feel genuinely lucky for that incident, and other incidents later. But you go through all that stuff, and then you go to regular civilian life. For me doing my day job, it's the easiest job in the world, and I'm like, for the first few months, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I get paid more to do this 25 hours a week than I did to work my ass off 70 hours a week. But I also am not wearing armor. I don't have night vision. I don't have a cool gun. Can't blow stuff up, So you have to
that attitude.
Oh, wow. Did y'all say that simultaneously?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, wow.
Nathan
It's like
and I
y'all hang
really
out a
think
lot or
so.
something.
I
Y'all
didn't even
are
know he said it.
Yeah, y'all's periods are in sync and everything. That's crazy.
Sounds
We
like
do each
someone's
other's
jealous.
nails sometimes. It's nice.
So Nate, you've barely spoken, probably because you're drunk on the Gatorade bottle of liquor that you've been drinking.
Okay, this is just full of water. The Halloween glass.
Oh,
Let's get Hallowacky. On the other hand,
Well,
that is refilled.
When you said it was the same drink earlier, I was like, you made the same drink in a Gatorade bottle. I thought that was a Gatorade bottle full of martini, and
this keeps me hydrated. This keeps me as a white girl.
So, if you want to get autistic with the alcohol stats, actually, what happens when you drink liquor and you hydrate at the same time? Alcohol actually blocks some of the hormones that cause you to uptake water, and so when you drink while you're drinking, it does flush alcohol out, but you don't absorb any. You will be dehydrated tomorrow if you got drunk, no matter how much water you drink right now. Alcohol actually has to process out of your system first. So it's good to drink because it makes you stop being drunk because you piss a bunch of it out, but it's not going to hydrate you for tomorrow.
Did not know that. That's very good to know.
Yeah, it's better to hydrate the day before
and
then just pace yourself than it is to drink a bunch and drink water because then you're just pissing all your money out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so tell us about you getting out of the Canadian Army or whatever branch it was you served in, because I know nothing about your service.
God, I barely.
He doesn't
did anything
talk about it.
Yeah, I don't really talk about it.
If you don't do your service justification for what you've done, then I'm just going to talk about you. So you tell people what you did.
I mean, you know exactly what I've said, and I'll just repeat the same thing. Child of watching 9/11, grew up drinking the Kool-Aid of, we got to go get these brown people. I remember, get home every day, watch CNN, CTV. War on terror. Oh, they're destroying our freedoms. Grew up in a military family. My dad was Black Watch.
Y'all don't have freedoms.
No, we do not. And that's something that I'm working on, as everyone who is listening to this knows, trying to get the fuck out of here before, I don't triple mask to get my daily ration of, I don't know, Trudeau bucks and, a drone. A Hellfire missile just cruises out of the sky and just turns me into fucking red paste. Um,
Oh
but
god.
no, I joined up at 17. Went on the bus, off the bus for 3 years. I'd like to say that I had like a big like revelation in terms of kind of what you guys did. But mine kind of came before that, and it didn't come in quite as dramatic a way. I just realized I was wasting my life, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And when one of my friends was killed in a lav rollover, like
Hmm.
IEU rolled over one of the armored vehicles we use, I just decided, fuck it, this just isn't worth it. I don't even know why we're here. This is year one of the war on terror. Like I lived in the Middle East in like 2003, 2004 with my dad just for his work. And the things that I saw there, which, I lived in a peaceful area, but regardless, versus the things that I heard and the propaganda we were being fed, it just didn't add up. And I think that added a lot to my perspective of just fuck this. And, my politics have developed significantly probably in the last the last few years, I want to say, but there were hints of it then. And the big reason I've been, keeping quiet for the most part on this one is you guys have a lot more relevant of an experience, and I didn't really want to detract from that, as I don't really have anything profound to add. I agree with everything, but it's not really my place to be like, oh yeah,
Well,
I felt a bullet whiz over my head. It's like, yes, I had that once when I was, sitting in the fucking butts of a controlled firing range. Like, I don't have the same, like, experience.
It's just a perspective.
I never did anything that dangerous.
fucking
I just,
Canadians are always apologizing, man. It's your
yeah.
podcast, bro. No,
Yeah.
no, and
But
I understand. I just,
yeah.
for me, just as an individual and a fan of y'all's work and all that, to be able to get to talk to y'all, I just didn't know really what your experience was. So that's
Yeah.
cool to know. And I would also like to add that the caveat that law enforcement is very different than the military. So
Yeah.
what you guys experienced overseas, I wouldn't even classify as the same as what a cop would experience. Baton Rouge is like a fucking war zone. The almost 6 years that I was there, we did lose more people per our unit size at my department and our sister department, BRPD, than people deployed. We had
Holy
12
shit.
killed by gunfire and 3 killed by car crashes.
That's fucking awful. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that is a common theme, though, and that is something that I kind of want to ask you about, because there is some. I don't know if it's necessarily anti-cop rhetoric. It's more sounds like it's anti-law enforcement establishment rhetoric coming from you. And you left. You started Orion Group, Orion, and you mentioned though that you are still a volunteer cop. Now, how does because you have the rhetoric, you understand you're not doing what you do most of the time. Well, what is different from what you do as a volunteer versus what you were doing as a full-time employee?
That's a really good question. Yeah. So, and the same question you just asked, I got asked at the Green Beret Foundation event because people were like, "So you're a cop, right?" And then we delved into this conversation. So, as a volunteer in Louisiana, you're fully commissioned, meaning for anybody that doesn't understand that, you have all the powers that be of a cop that works full time and gets paid. You just choose when to volunteer, and departments can set a minimum basis for that. So a department might say, "Hey, we want you to come out for 20 hours this month, 5 hours a week, whatever, just to keep up your commission." In my case, it's a little bit of that, and it's a lot of Orion Training Group has resources that can benefit the department, and it's my hometown, and I know a lot of people that work there, and there's kind of a quid pro quo there, right? It's like, hey, look, we're a small department, we don't have a ton of training budget, but if we bring you on, you can give us training and make sure that our guys are safe and get the best resources that they can to do the job right. And the reason that I'm comfortable providing that function is that department, for lack of a better term, is super fucking based. They don't enforce any of the bullshit. They don't have anything to do with any of the bullshit that my previous department had things to do with. And that's really what it's summed up as, man. It's good people. It's a good place. It's a grassroots community. and the people that work there are part of the community. It's not the kind of place where they're going to say, yeah, if we let people sell heroin to our neighbors, we'll get more money. It's not funded that way. It's small. So the place I left was 1,000 sworn. This is like 38 sworn.
Yeah. Small locally, like small local law enforcement who actually have ties to the community that they're
correct. Yeah, I grew up across the street from the police department. Like the house that I grew up in is, you could literally throw a rock and hit it from the police department. So I have a lot of ties there, and I feel very comfortable knowing that the training that I'm providing those guys is in the context of, and you should hear me on my soapbox when we're training. Hey, look, guys, when you're going to search a house at night on an alarm call, that is a human being's home, a person that likely needs help, that is an American citizen and could be, think of it as your family member. You're going to put your life on the line, not because you're a hero or because you're fucking special, but because you signed on the dotted line and swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. And when I had to swear my oath, I don't even remember the oath I swore the first time, right? I remember the oath that I swore this time. And the chief looked me in the eye and said, we uphold the Constitution here. You're not going to do anything when you're here that conflicts with the Constitution and that doesn't support and directly benefit the individuals you're in contact with. And then we swore the oath, right? And there's nothing in the oath about anything but the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of Louisiana. That's it. There's no you will enforce this, and this. Is I swear to uphold, and then it lists the constitutions to protect the people of the city, and that's it. And so to me, I look at it almost as completely different roles. And also, when you're serving a sheriff's department in the Constitution of Louisiana states that he is the tax collector for the state. So your function is as a tax collector, literally. That's like in your job title. A police department is not that way. We don't collect any taxes. You simply enforce municipal rules, which often takes the form of noise complaints or traffic tickets or whatever. But the guys that work at that department, dude, it's a bunch of fucking rednecks, right? It's the guys that live in the community. And so it really has been a very wholesome experience. It's entirely different. And again, I love and miss so many dudes in my previous department. I keep up with a bunch of them. Like the guys on my old shift, when I got promoted to corporal and moved to a different substation that was in a different area of town, I got super tight with those guys. As tight, if not closer than some of the SWAT guys. And I miss them so fucking much. And keep up with them here and there. But I don't want to be that guy that shows up to work. I don't want to bug them. So there's those personal relationships at the previous department, but the mission set and the work environment at this other place that I'm at now is so totally different, that I don't feel like it really even compares as far as function. My function is totally different here than it was at the previous place.
It sounds like there's a lot less enforcement of victimless crimes with your current job than what was likely happening at your previous job. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, because a sheriff is a political figure that is elected. And so individual experiences that make you feel negative towards the sheriff propagate into less votes. And so you have to deal with a lot of bullshit, right? What is a really big issue for the middle class, middle-aged, white voting base of a department? Probably, the war on drugs.
Yeah, I was going to say drugs,
speeding tickets, things like that. And so you end up with a lot of that, we have to grandstand and look a certain way for the public. We have to take reports that are fucking nonsense. Legitimately have to write reports on my neighbor's dog shit in my lawn, go arrest them. And you have to write a report on it, even though you take no action. But at a police department, you're unionized, and the police chief is appointed by the mayor. Now that's a double-edged sword, because he owes his loyalty to the mayor. The mayor's elected, but the police chief is not. And so there's pros and cons there, right? The sheriff is directly elected by the people, but because of that, he has to make appearances. The police chief, everyone's unionized, so they can say to get fucked if they want to. Whenever someone calls about some nonsense that doesn't need to actually be dealt with. So and that's just speaking factually. That's not even about this police chief or that sheriff. That's just police chiefs versus sheriffs, the way it works in Louisiana, at least. There's so much nuance there, and it is totally different. Like you could go to South Carolina, and a sheriff there mostly runs the jail, and the police chief is elected. So it's just talking about the little microcosm here we have in Cajun Swampland, that it's totally different, and the way that it works, the differences between these departments is directly reflected by how the leadership is appointed or elected, and if they're unionized or not.
I think the thing that because I respect the people that join law enforcement and military with great intentions. I do not respect the establishment that they have to work within the parameters of. But maybe I'm just rationalizing to myself because I like you, but we'll see. What it sounds like, though, it sounds like you're a volunteer. So you're not getting paid by people who might necessarily not want to pay you.
Yep.
So you're a volunteer. You're not enforcing victimless crimes. And you are very embedded with the community in the sense of you're not like undercover, not embedded like that. I mean, embedded as in you understand the community, you understand the people
you
within
grew
it.
up there, like you
And
know
you're
the
invested,
people.
exactly.
And I
So
love
it's
that. I
not-
think that's how law enforcement should be.
yeah,
Yes.
that sounds like how it very much should be, because once you have that detachment from the community, it makes it significantly easier to start enforcing those victimless crimes that are pretty fucking stupid. You know, like for example, I use upstate New York as an example all the time because I grew up there and I know it there.
Upstate New York.
Upstate New
God,
York, but
kill me.
when New York State passed the SAFE Act, Cuomo was like, "Hey, New York State Police, even in upstate, you have to go around and start confiscating magazines." And New York City Police were like, "Oh yeah, we can probably do that." And then upstate police were like, "Fuck no, we're not doing that. Are you fucking stupid? I'm not going to go knock on people's doors and ask for a legal thing. Are you fucking dumb?" And they didn't enforce it. Now, that's not to say New York State Police aren't terrible, because I fucking hate them. You know, getting speeding tickets for doing like 75 and a 70, having a fat cop waddle up to my car choking on his own neck fat.
We've circled all the way back to fat shaming.
We circled all the way back to
Oh
fat
my
people
god!
shaming.
Everything always comes back to fat shaming.
But the point being, when you get, you detach from that local community, that's when it starts becoming easier to do those things, and you start rationalizing to yourself as a cop or anybody. But it sounds like from what you're doing, it's very ideal. I mean, it's volunteer. You know the community, you know the people within it, and you're able to probably solve a lot of the issues that get brought to you without getting any type of enforcement involved. I imagine if, Joey from the swamp is complaining about Brenda from the other side of the swamp doing swamp stuff, you're able to go and talk to them both and be like, "Hey, look, like, let's solve this amongst ourselves and then go about our time."
Which is how it used to be. I mean, y'all ever watched the Andy Griffith Show, right? Dude doesn't even wear a gun. He's a member of the community, and then he talks everybody through everything, and nobody ever gets arrested. Even the drunk guy who's always drunk, they let him sleep it off in the drunk tank. That's the idealist kind of picture of American policing is, I'm one of you guys. I took on the social responsibility of being a public servant, and now I'm going to function in that capacity as a friendly member of the community. Yeah. And I think that that's idealist. That's hard to do when you're getting shot at and ambushed and everything else.
Yeah, so the big city and all of that, it's...
Yeah, well, like in Baton Rouge, you have 1,000 sworn. We've had 4 ambushes while I was there. There's a different level. There becomes an element of us versus them, right? So you never know when you're going to get shot at, when you might have to shoot somebody. You almost feel like you're rolling through the street of a war zone because you drive down the road and there's people with an AK sitting on their front porch and there's babies in the street with flies in their eyes and stuff. That's Holy really fuck. Shit that you see. Yeah. So
I saw the movie 999 a long time ago, and that kind of reminds me of it.
I've never seen that. I'll have to check that out.
It's, Georgia. Yeah, it's I recommend it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I'm just basically saying that in a small town where you grew up, it's easy to separate. To not separate and to say, look, you guys are just people. You need to talk about this and this and that. And of course, that doesn't always work. You can't always de-escalate. I made the mistake of being too soft on people before, and it's got me a lot of regrets. But you have to balance it, and that's what's so hard about being a cop is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. right? And you have a job to do. I believe it is a necessary profession, but I believe that it is done poorly 90% of the time. Have y'all ever heard of Dr. Paul Whitesell and the speech he gives to the Indiana State Police?
No, who's that?
So he was a speaker at this Indiana State Police induction, and it's called the Heraclitus speech. If you just Google or YouTube Dr. Paul Whitesell Heraclitus speech, and some people, he pronounces it Heraclitus, it's Heraclitus, is a guy who trained Greek warriors, and he says out of every 100 men that they send me to train, 80 of them are nothing but targets. 10 of them should not even be here. 9 of them are fighters, and 1 of them is a warrior. And we have to find the warrior because he'll bring the others back. What he's saying is 90% of people doing these martial jobs do not fucking belong at all. And that other 10% are the people that actually really are doing the work, and they're doing it well, right? And I think that goes back to what Mitch said earlier. There's a select few in the military and in law enforcement that have the right heart and are doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. But the hierarchy of it is not going to allow them to exist because the other 80% or 90% there, including leadership, don't fucking belong. And so you are vastly outnumbered by people that shouldn't be doing the job. And they're the people that are writing you tickets because your fucking fumes coming out of your exhaust are the wrong number. You know, like that motorcycle cop in California who pulls a guy over and is like, oh, rev your engine, and measures the exhaust fumes. That is not what policing is supposed to be about. Policing is supposed to be about public service. And you are collecting taxes when you do that on a bullshit law. And in my mind, that is not police work. That guy is a fucking statist. Yeah. And policing should be grassroots. It should be local communities saying, hey, we have some issues. We have some laws that need to be enforced for everyone's safety, but it's reasonable and it's implemented reasonably by people in this community. And I think that that's the balance. And I don't know how to really affect that because you have paychecks. As Mitch said, part of the reason I can do what I do and I enjoy it is because I'm not getting paid to do that. It's on me, right? Nobody can say, oh, if you don't do X, Y, Z, we're going to fire you and then you won't have money. Paycheck's a hell of a fucking bit of leverage, right?
Yeah.
So
there's a couple things I want to bring up, but one thing I want to address before. You brought up de-escalation. And just in life, de-escalation skills are something that people often neglect. Everybody wants to focus on being the aggressor. Everybody wants to focus on being, the big Billy badass. And you should be training for that, obviously. You should be training CQB. You should be training small unit tactics. You should be training all these things. De-escalation skills, however, is something that is neglected and it shouldn't be. I think de-escalate 95% of all violent encounters. I mean, this is no official. I'm pulling something out of my ass, but I feel like a majority of violent encounters can be avoided if 1, 2, or however many parties can just de-escalate the situation and walk away.
Yeah, but the problem that you run into there is trying to control someone else's behavior by inputting your own behavior. So I cannot make someone else make a decision. They can play off my behavior, but if they've already committed, I can't change it. And that's where we run into the slippery slope of like, the cop should have de-escalated. Well, he can only do so much to control someone else's behavior. And ultimately, if the public's life's at stake or his life's at stake, you want him to just not do anything. So you get to this slippery slope of what do we define de-escalation as? In my mind, people use it in the buzzword capacity of that cop is responsible for the other party's behavior. Which is wrong. Now, the cop is obviously responsible for his own behavior, and I can give you examples of when I escalated things because I was pissed off, and I made it worse, and I ended up putting hands on somebody, right? Of course, it's justified. We were only there because we got called out. Say again?
You're a cop, of course it's justified.
Exactly. So, yeah, there's different angles that are played here, right? You show up because someone's irate. You don't do anything to calm them down. You simply play off of them being irate, and then they throw hands, and then you fight. And okay, well, cool. You try to fight a cop. What you gonna do? I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Alton Sterling shooting.
No, who's that?
No, I'm not.
So yeah, it was a huge fucking deal in Baton Rouge. Alton Sterling was a convicted sex offender, known to be a drug dealer and just kind of a general, corner, kind of like, stepped on weed type of dealer. He sold fake CDs and pirated DVDs and shit like that. And I never dealt with him because he mostly was in the city limits, and the sheriff's office deals mostly with stuff outside the city limits. But he had been in an incident before where they tried to arrest him, and he tried to pull a gun, and he was taken into custody safely, right? So the cops knew this guy usually is armed. Sometimes he tries to resist arrest. They've disarmed him successfully when he was trying to arm himself before. They get called out there knowing that he's probably armed. He's loitering like in front of a gas station or something. It was some like bullshit, like, he's loitering type of call. And they ended up getting into a fight with him and killing him, shooting him point blank. And it was a huge deal. We got called out for riots. There was property damage. If you Google Baton Rouge, Alton Sterling riots, there's a world famous now photo of this beautiful black girl in a dress, and the SWAT dudes are running up in all their riot gear to arrest her because she was refusing to retreat from her line. And it's very poetic looking, right? It was a huge deal down here. Well, after 2 years, count them 1, 2, then the investigation is over. Some of the body cam footage is released to one of the officers, and the first thing he says when he gets out of the car is, "I'm going to fucking shoot you." Like, he didn't get out of the car and was like, "Hey man, we got like here's my motto: if you treat people like people and you give them a little respect, you'll go a long way." That was what I taught my trainees. That's how I always dealt with people. If you just fucking talk to people like a human being, you're going to be outside the norm, right? They're not used to that. If they're having a police encounter, it's already probably the worst day of their life. So if you just calmly say, "Hey, bro, here's what we're here for. Here's what I need," usually it goes well. The first thing this dude says when he gets out is, I think the quote was, "I'm going to blow your fucking head off." It wasn't like, "Hey, man, look, we got a call. You were this. You were called about this. I know you probably got a gun on you, man. Look, just put your hands in the car. I'm going to pat you down. We're going to cut you a misdemeanor summons. We're going to let you roll."
Yeah.
Whatever. Instead, it was, "I'm gonna blow your fucking head off." So then the dude's like, "Holy shit, what did you say to me?" And then they get into a fight, and he does try to pull a gun. That much is obvious from the cameras. Now keep in mind, it started off with, "I'm gonna kill you," and then he tries to pull a gun out. It ends up being ruled as justified. The cops are not charged with anything, and that's when the riots start over again, right? And that goes back to your point of, would that guy be alive if a different approach had been taken? And we can Monday morning quarterback it to death, but as a cop and as a professional, me personally would never start off that way, right? That's not how is that going to be productive? And a lot of cops are jaded and kind of broken inside, and they don't think of people they're dealing with on the street as human beings. And so they jump out the car with the "I'm going to fucking kill you" attitude, because they've seen so much and they've done so much and they've been mistreated. And, we can justify it however we want, but ultimately, in my mind, de-escalation is just not starting off at level 10. If you start off as a reasonable person and you treat somebody normally, they won't really have the opportunity to go nuts unless they were already there. And at that point, I can't control it. But if I start off at 10 and they were at 3 and they jumped to 10, that's on me, right?
I love talking to you because I hear certain things you say, makes me think of something in a different perspective, and I'm really enjoying it. But when it comes to de-escalation specifically, one thing that I have learned, and in my unique experience, because it's my own, it's not the entire world's, what I have found, uniforms and guns never de-escalate. Never.
Yeah, that's actually on the force continuum. That is the first level of use of force, is officer presence.
It is showing up. If, for example, even if we went to a village in Afghanistan to provide humanitarian aid, I've never been a part of one of those operations, right? But I see pictures of it. You're showing up still with guns, with security perimeters, and you might be carrying humanitarian aid. That presence alone puts people on edge. Now, it doesn't cause issues all the time. I'm not saying that's what it does. But if you show up to an already tense situation in a uniform with a gun, well, now that situation is now escalated because you're there.
You're 100%
military
correct.
Law enforcement. So I think that's something to consider as well before calling the police on your neighbor because they're being too loud. Maybe you just go knock on the door. "Hey, a little bit loud. Can you just quiet down a little bit?" Simple little things like that. And then maybe, if they're a dickhead and they're like, no, fuck you, and they keep being loud and keep your kid up, maybe
Not like,
go
I'm
knock
going to
her
blow
down.
your fucking head off.
But
Kinda.
I feel like there's a lot of
Reasonable.
things. There's a lot of things that can be solved if people simply just interacted with each other, as opposed to bringing in the next level of
Yes.
the next level of force, and
that is such a reflection of our society. We live in the McDonald's touchscreen gimme society, right?
Yeah.
And cops are a function of that. I don't want to go talk to my neighbor about the loud music because I have no fucking social skills and I grew up in a box. So I'm going to call somebody with a gun to go tell them to turn their music down. And that's happened to me. My neighbors have called because we had a loud Halloween party, and a former coworker of mine shows up and it's like, first of all, your costume's super gay. Also, can you turn the music down? So, and it's really funny to be on the receiving end of it because I'm like, hey, what's up? Oh, your music's too loud. I'll totally turn that down, which is the same thing that anybody else is thinking. And of course, as soon as they drive off, the music goes back up. So what are you really doing as a cop in that situation? Absolutely fucking nothing. And I would often, I kind of got in trouble for this, and I was kind of famous for it among the younger people of the department, but I would often call. You show yourself on the computer, right? You have this CAD screen where you can input commands, and the people in dispatch can send you stuff. It's a two-way input system to track data. They would send you this call, and it would pop up on your screen and say, "I've got a noise complaint." I would just show myself on scene, boop, press F3 or whatever, and then I call the person. I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm like, "What do you mean? The person's they're playing loud music." Okay, did you talk to him? Well, no. So you scared of him? I mean, okay, look, you do me a favor. If it means that much to you, go knock on their door and ask them to turn it down. And if they're ugly to you or they do something bad or whatever, call us back. But at this point in time, that is a waste of public resources. I'm sorry, I won't be going out to that because I'm functioning as a supervisor at this point. Yeah. And guess what? They didn't call back because they didn't have the fucking balls to go out there. And that was it. Done. I didn't waste gas. I didn't drive over there. I didn't scare the fuck out of somebody at their party and ruin it for everyone by showing up with a gun. And I think if more cops thought that way and more administrations supported that kind of action and good use of resources, we'd have a lot less issues.
I completely agree. Now, I do want to bring up one more point. This might be a little bit more controversial.
Oh, Lord.
You mentioned... I'm here for it, though. I feel like I love these types of conversations.
Same, honestly.
We can come from different viewpoints, and at the end of the day, be like, no, that shit fucking matters. Like, you're still a dope person. I appreciate you. You brought up only enforcing what's reasonable, right? And to you and me, that is a very, very simple, very, very simple, easy to understand process. The problem that I have with only enforcing what's reasonable is different people have different definitions for what's reasonable. For some people, the war on drugs is what's reasonable. For other people, the ATF and what they do is
they're dumb.
And I agree, they're dumb. But the problem isn't that we think they're dumb and we have a different perspective. The problem is we deem that it's okay to enforce what's reasonable. And I think that is where it gets dangerous, and I think that's where a lot of the problems come into play, because there are a lot of people, like myself and you, that can be like, hey, this is what's reasonable, this is what isn't reasonable, but people that maybe live within those parameters are like, well, I don't think that's reasonable at all. And then that's when we start to get into this escalation of enforcing things that we think are unreasonable.
That's how you get people that enforce red flag laws, because they think it's reasonable.
Exactly. So my point with that is, while there are good people like yourself, like I think myself and Nathan, and let's say we were all in law enforcement together, I think.
Can you imagine?
For starters, hilarious. But second of all, I don't think we would enforce things that a lot of people would expect us to, if anything. And there are other people, though, that use the same system or the same parameters and the same, what's okay and what isn't to enforce terrible things. So my problem, as I said, is not with the people necessarily. It can be with the people eventually, but it starts with the parameters. I have the utmost respect for people that have good intentions, that want to do good, but they're restricted by the parameters set by them, by the entire agency or the department. And it becomes difficult for me when you say, I want to enforce and I only enforce what's reasonable, to think, okay, well, I'm glad that you're doing it. There aren't other people doing it, and they're using the same system that you are to enforce unreasonable things.
Yeah.
So
that's really good, man. Yeah, you bring up some great points. And I think that we kind of come back to my motto of evaluate the individual. So me as an individual, as you just said, to quote, as a dope person, right? So you agree with a lot of things I agree with. Keep in mind, this is a journey. So I ended up here at the point that I'm on this podcast, and I'm a very different person than I was 2 years ago when I no knock raid for the ATF, right? So we all grow, we all change, we all realize things. At some point, there was probably a young 18-year-old in Nazi Germany who thought it was reasonable that he was of a pure race and that it was a good thing to do to persecute the Jewish people, right? He thought it was reasonable and it was the right thing. He never felt any moral qualms with what he was doing. So in and of itself, thinking it's reasonable is not a moral justification because it's relative to the individual, right? So the next level becomes, as a collective, as a society, if we have judged that something is reasonable, then usually it gets passed into a law, right? Except that now we have people that are elected that don't follow the will of the people. And so we end up with this multifaceted, multi-layered thing where all of the weight of all that burden of these laws that are frankly bullshit is put now on this individual cop in what we call officer discretion, which is a legal principle. If I pull somebody over, as you said, for going 75 and a 70, technically are they breaking the law? Sure. But my officer discretion says it's a nonviolent crime. Do I really have to arrest that person for that? It's not a shall law, meaning I don't have to. It is left up to me. An example of a shall law would be if you have actual evidence of domestic violence, whether it's male on male, male on female, female on female, female on male, it doesn't matter. If they're in a domestic relationship in the state of Louisiana, residing in the same place in an intimate relationship, it is a shall law. It doesn't matter what I think. They have to go to jail. But most laws are not written that way, right? So if it's not written that way, you have what's called officer discretion. And so I can decide in that moment that it's not reasonable to enforce what the people have decided via a body of elected officials is reasonable, but it's given what we call the totality of the circumstances. It's a grandma that has a lead foot and can't see her dashboard. All right, I'm going to call her friend to come get her. I'm not going to write her a ticket and ruin her life and charge her $300 because the totality of the circumstances tells me as a reasonable individual, that's not the best response. As you said, that's a double-edged sword because there's going to be that asshole with the crew cut that writes his own mother a ticket and every other fucking Joe Blow that comes through. Exactly. So you have to evaluate the individual and say most cops are going to be one way or most cops aren't going to be the other way based on trends of individuals. But ultimately what it comes down to is what has been legislated and what has been allowed to be legislated. And in America, at least, we have allowed a lot of things to become law that never would have flown even 40 years ago, Yeah. And now it falls on cops to be the bad guy to have to enforce it because that's their job. So do we end up saying, well, we shouldn't have cops because the job is fucked? What happens when there's a hostage rescue to be done? Are we going to get a bunch of fucking yahoos together with no formalized training? You know what I'm saying? So there's this weird balance between, you got all these cringy cops who are like, I'm the line between anarchy. I'm like, no, you're in the line at Burger King. But, yeah. There is some element to that of who else is going to fucking do it. Because there's a lot of people that aren't signing up to do the job and they know what it requires and they know what you may have to do. You always hear firemen say that, right? Like I'm not paid for what I'm doing because they're making fucking chili and bunking, spooning in the bunk. But they're paid for what they might have to do. And because I'm not about to run into a fucking burning building, right? If I see a building burning on the side of the road and it's engulfed and I hear screaming inside and I'm wearing my fucking polyester MC Hammer pants, I'm not running in there to save anybody because it's going to kill me, right? But there are guys who sign up to wear the Nomex suit and do that, and God bless them for it. So we end up in this weird catch-22 of, you're exactly right, officer discretion is a double-edged sword, but also how do we end up with only good laws? Because we live in a representative system. We elect shitheads and make shit laws, and then the cops are forced to enforce them. I mean, what do we do,
Well, and that just becomes a thing, because like you said, you can't excuse, because the Nazis in Germany, while they were doing what they're told, we already agreed, and most people would be like, okay, well, just because you were told to do it doesn't make it okay to do it. And
Right.
on the same hand, though, like you said, there's no type of people that can come and assist when there's a hostage, right? Somebody is actively violating somebody else's individual rights, right?
Yep.
And it, because not everybody can do that themselves. If you ask somebody, and even myself, I'm only capable of so much. Even with a not fucked back and neck, I'm only capable of so much. But I would like to think, if I can't actively defend my own rights, do I have the right to call on others to do it for me? And that's a question I'm not too sure. If they volunteer and they come and do it, I mean, fuck, I'm going to be very grateful.
Which is why I like the idea of volunteer service.
Yes, and that's
Unpaid.
kind of why I don't think I'm
like
rationalizing what you do. I don't think I'm just rationalizing what you do because I like you. I think it's because what you are doing is the closest thing that I can think of. And I'm sure there's much smarter people than any of us here that have this perfect ideal, thing where there's either no cops or all cops, and either way it works perfectly,
Right.
That's not me. But I do think what you do is the closest thing to what I can imagine working while not overstepping its boundaries and keeping it to its own parameters, as opposed to becoming something bigger, which is what we see.
Well, it reflects so volunteer police service reflects somewhat original law enforcement was like when the this nation was founded, as it were. There was no standing police force. There was a magistrate, which was an elected official, and then bailiffs and people that were appointed to do things for specific instances, right? So if somebody was accused of murder, they would, for lack of a better term, form a posse and go get him. But it was sanctioned and made official by the local elected government. But it wasn't a bunch of cops. It was like, hey, go get the Jones boys and go get, Dr. Whatever, and we're going to get our muskets together and we're going to go get this guy. And that was it. It was just a little group of people that went and did the bidding of the court, and they were sanctioned by the court. And there's a historian right now that is raging because he's like, you used all the wrong words. But the point being, it was not like now where we have 1,000 people making $50,000 a year, and it's this massive, nasty machine that needs to collect its own taxes. It was citizen service, voluntary for a specific task. And I don't know how we would make law enforcement look like that now, especially on the scale of like a city like New York that has 15 million people.
Yeah, once you have cities like that, it's
what are you
I
going to do?
know. I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I'm
Right.
not.
I think if you want to get really like a meme, I think the Industrial Revolution fucked us over.
The Industrial Revolution and its consequences.
People thriving is a terrible thing.
Correct. Yeah, if we all died at 25 in a cave and there was no Twitter, life would be better. But all that to say, I don't think we can exist at the level that we all wish we could. We all know what's right. Like in our hearts, we know it's right to leave people fuck alone, to live peacefully, and to not interfere with each other. But we're so far past that now. We're so far past it.
Well, and when you say we all, I don't think we all do. I think
the three of us right here.
I think at least all of us here know.
Yes.
But there are people, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
When you start having 15 million people live together, and
there's no individuals anymore. Right. Joseph Stalin said, shout out to homie Joe. Nathan's like, no. Yeah, no. Joseph Stalin said that one death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Yep.
Yeah.
And so when you have one local cop who volunteers and everybody gets along, that's great. When you have 1 million people and they have 5,000 cops to police them, it's a bunch of data and statistics and nobody gives a shit anymore. And I think that's how we got to where we are, because when you hear legitimately New York has 55,000 sworn, right?
Yeah.
That is a monster. That is a monster that cannot be controlled. And how in God's name are we supposed to say that each and every one of those individuals has the best public interest at heart? With that much data, you know how many sociopaths and fucktards and mob members there are in that group?
Yeah.
So, and once again, I'm not saying anything bad about NYPD as an institution.
They're terrible.
As an institution, they have an awful reputation, yeah, and they enforce some of the worst laws in the country. So, yeah, just on principle, yeah, no, terrible. But there's probably some great individuals in there, right? That are really trying to do the right thing, and they're being hindered by this machine that exists to serve itself.
Yeah. Well, before we get too deep into politics, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. There's enough people talking about politics. I do just want to say this all seems to stem from this ridiculous concept that one person is going to be elected by hundreds of millions of people and enforce different ways of living and different views to people that they have never met, that they've never interacted with in different parts of the country. And the United States is huge. It comes down from this original, this wild idea that one person should be able to do that. And I don't want to get too deep into politics.
Yeah, we don't have to get too deep into that. I would say that was a result of war feeding our economy for the last 50 years, and also a result of the Civil War and the loss of states' rights. And you'll never hear me being like, the South will rise again, or any dumb shit like that. But I do think that in the Civil War, we lost something. All the states, even the ones in the Union, lost something that they'll never get back. And that was the ability to self-govern.
And even then, let's take it smaller to the state itself. Some states are really fucking big too. And there's a lot of people that live very differently. And it's crazy still that even then one governor controls how one, New York City lives, and also how upstate bumblefuck corn-fed where I grew up, New York lives.
Yeah.
It's a very, very weird idea that a lot of people have accepted as normal and okay.
Well, it's the normalization of socialism, because of the socialist system, excuse me. You've got the 0.001% of the leaders of the party, and you got fucking everybody else. And we're there. I think it's more of an oligarchy, but not to, like you said, not to get too deep into the weeds, but I'm going to throw the B word out there. Do y'all think balkanization will ever happen to the U.S.?
God, I fucking hope it does.
Seditionist sees him. Oh, wait, he's Canadian.
I say, it would be good.
There'll be a drone strike for me soon, I'm sure.
And when I say I think it would be good, it would be better than what we currently have, I think, but it also still would not be ideal.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm in one of the second poorest state in the union. Cheers to Mississippi for making me not feel as bad. But our budget is 72 or 73% last time I looked, federal funding. So that is despite having the largest oil refinery in the country, which is Exxon Chemical Plant, which is 26 square miles, the Mississippi River Delta, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and the largest sugarcane industry in the country, which is federally subsidized. And yet we are still the second poorest state in the union. I don't know how that is. I don't know where that money's going. It's certainly not into the hands of the people that are producing. And so I can't help but wonder if we balkanized and we weren't subsidized by the federal government, there would be no state budget, there would be no state government, and thereby we would lose a lot of the large departments. So like the team I was on, our night vision was federally funded, federally purchased. Our TRVs, a lot of our equipment was bought on the 1033 program. Essentially, we're a federally subsidized high-level team. We even have a federal task force, JTF-7, which is for maritime security. We did VBSS stuff up and down the Mississippi as a local sheriff's office. And all that stuff is funded through federal grants. So without federal funding, you lose a lot of what we've been talking about being this big monster. It is the shadow of the federal government being projected through state budgets that are funded by it. So if we balkanized and we became the country of whatever, we probably would get absorbed by Texas or something like that. What would it look like for a small, poor state like this? Would law enforcement disappear? Would we go back to a posse system? Or would it be the fucking mob rule where, hey, I think Joe Blow did so-and-so and we just fucking hang the dude because there's nobody to tell us not to? That's my fear about that kind of thing. And y'all, these retards, excuse the R word here, on
we say all the time.
yeah, all these fucking retards on Instagram that are like anarchy, okay, yeah, it's great until you're the person getting lynched because you said something that the mob doesn't like, right? So there's pros and cons to that. What would actually happen for poor states that lose federal funding?
Isn't what we have right now kind of mob rule though?
Honestly, I'm inclined to agree with Mitch there. Yeah,
maybe.
We are at a point where it's like what the 51% of the entire federal government, which is elected by all of the cities, effectively you get lynched.
Yeah, much like everything, it is a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
where
I would say here it's not that way.
Yeah.
I don't know other states.
Yeah,
I think it's we're. I'm not going to enter this today. We'll enter this today. But I do very much enjoy speaking with you, and I do think that we could definitely have a very good, civilized political discussion, even though as we were getting into it, it sounds like we were about to disagree a lot, but that's fine.
yeah,
that is perfectly okay.
I am very good at being devil's advocate too. I think that the way that I feel we can solve some of these issues, we probably would be a lot alike. I think what people throw around is an ideal, and they don't think about the consequences, right? What would, and that's where I was going with that. What would actually happen to Louisiana? What would the people of Louisiana experience from a regime change? Let's say America ceases to exist as we know it and becomes balkanized into regions or whatever. I think the people of Louisiana would suffer greatly for probably 5 to 15 years as there's an economic restructuring, a social restructuring. And so the question becomes, is it better off in the long run, or do we just keep doing what we're doing for the greater good, as it were?
I think a lot of people could probably agree that the way that we're going isn't it really a great one.
Yeah.
Bingo. And so where are we trending versus where we would be if we take a little suffering in the beginning?
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to from, you know what, I'm going to say this. We can all have our final closing pieces, and then we're going to wrap this up because I don't want this to turn too political, but I do think that we should have you on again and talk more about political semantics because I would love to talk about it with you.
I would love this. I've been kind of a fly on the wall for a lot of this. I'm really enjoying I'm really enjoying just the back and forth, and the two of you are very similar, but kind of diverged at a certain point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm really enjoying, as you're both good at talking about your particular views, and obviously I kind of lean a little on the very small government. Let's fucking balkanize. Let's just fucking do it. Screw it.
I agree with that as an ideal, but I don't know if the results would be what we'd hope.
You know what, Jared? You get your horse, I get my horse, Mitch gets my horse, we're a posse now. That's fine. Fucking do it. I'll learn how to make a lasso and everything.
A what? A lasso?
A lasso? Yeah.
It's a lasso. God. Oh,
dude, I'm fucking Canadian.
A prelude to...
I do have cowboy boots, though.
I'll get my lasso. Yeah. No. Jesus.
A prelude to our political episode that'll come out eventually that I'm going to start with. For me, it comes down to what's moral, not what is deemed right by individuals or a large group. It comes down to what's moral.
And so then what are we using as our moral compass? What is our moral absolute?
Now, that's a whole can of worms.
You better not say religion.
No. Not religion for me.
No, oh my God.
But
that's a 2-hour podcast in itself.
Yes.
That's a whole... I really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah,
I really do think... Yeah, I really do want to have you on in the future because...
Yeah, we need a part 2.
Yeah, like I said, as we got
enjoyed
to the
this
end,
immensely.
Yeah, as we got to the end, I think we started to hit a point where we're going to disagree a little bit more, and I love that because I feel like
civil
we're not just going to be like, you're fucking dumb and just start going all stupid. I would love to have a conversation. I love when people challenge my beliefs, and I love challenging others' beliefs because it makes me constantly have to think about it. But it's going to be a great time. But I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate what you do in regards to training in the community, and I hope I'm not just rationalizing what I do. I don't think I do, and I think we've confirmed that what you're doing is probably the most ideal that I can think of.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, no, you're awesome. Big fan.
I'm really looking forward to doing more with you.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for having me on and for the opportunity and for putting up with my mild Southern accent and poor audio quality.
Oh, it's wonderful. The audio quality is actually quite good.
Okay,
please,
good, yeah.
Take as long as you need. Talk about yourself, plug yourself, show yourself, talk about what you got going on.
Yeah.
I mean, Long story short, we offer training that is unrestricted unless the venue itself needs to restrict for their own liability reasons. So what that means is basically we train civilians when other people don't. So if you're listening to this and you're looking for CQB, firearms, medical, we also offer land nav, small unit maneuvering. We're going to dabble in some other stuff here and there. But our priority is preparing the American citizenry to fulfill what we would consider the mandate of the Second Amendment, which is being well regulated. And you can take that word to mean whatever you want. We believe it means more than just owning a rifle for self-defense or for hunting. We believe it means being a well-rounded, well-trained individual. So we price everything according to that. We know that regular folks can't spend $800 on the medical class like some people charge. So we charge $300 or $350 if we have to travel. So check out the website. It's oriontraininggroup.com, and the Instagram, which is Orion Training Group. And check out, obviously, this podcast, but if you go on their page, they've done some guides with us and some doodles of my
wonderful legs.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out how to say that without sounding like I'm just going to go beat off looking in the mirror. But yeah, there's some really goofy drawings of my legs that Nathan's done. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been a blast sitting here, holding the cat and drinking whiskey and talking to y'all. It's been awesome.
I'm glad. And yeah, we're looking forward to doing more and recording again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Because we don't get into politics too much. I think our last episode was the most we got into politics, but a full episode was somebody that isn't of the same exact beliefs that we can actually have a conversation with without it just turning into a personal insult battle is something that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm big on that. I'm big on that. It's civil disagreement is the foundation of a free society. If we all just agree with each other, nothing's going to happen.
I feel we're losing that kind of every day. We're losing that a little more.
Well, maybe we can all change that culture,
You're on the cusp of getting to where I'm at. I love it. You're right there. We're so close. That's all right. No, really appreciate you coming on. Nathan, you've been a little quiet, so you can do all the closing stuff on our end.
I mean, I haven't been that quiet. I've just been enjoying just like the back and forth between. It's really good. It's really good. Well, this podcast brought to you by Advanced Warfighting Solutions. Advanced Warfighting Solutions. They make belts and plate carriers that I really like. I always get caught up in the bit. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah, they make good belts.
But yes, I run their belt and their plate carrier, and it's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, both the belt and the plate carrier I run too. Plate carrier hasn't replaced my main plate carrier, but it did replace my secondary plate carrier. And the belt I've been running for years, used it on deployments, during training, all different types of stuff. So, Art and War 10. Go save yourself some money on an SMU belt from AWS. And then
yes, Art and War 10 is the code. We do not get any kickback.
Yeah,
just,
no kickback.
It's pretty cool gear. Just, enjoy it.
Oh, check out the Patreon too. Well, BR is probably going to do our mid-roll ad for the Patreon, so I'll let him do that. But Applied Gear as well. Applied Gear, they do everyday carry belts, and Art and War 5 saves you $5 across their whole website, which doesn't seem like a lot, but their belts are already pretty reasonably priced. So
I'm wearing mine right now. It's pretty good.
Yep.
It's got the Cobra buckle and everything.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Check out Orion, not Orion, Orion. And
did I call him Orion? No, you called him Orion.
I called him Orion.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
we'll get into that next episode too.
That happens a lot. Yeah.
But no, next episode we'll have you on, talk about politics and civil.
God, we should do a vehicle CQB guide. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
Get with Will on that one.
Yeah, we can definitely do that too.
Hell yeah.
Sounds great. Closing remarks, tips. Jared, go.
Yeah, give us some dad advice.
Yeah, dad.
Dad advice. I'm not a dad, so
neither am I.
If you have cats and those are your children, scoop the litter often. Make sure that they have fresh water. Feed them. Same thing goes for kids. Don't leave poop in their diaper for too long, or they'll be mad. That's about all I know about children.
Dad advice: pick up your daughter or son and tell them you love them, because one day you won't be able to pick them up again.
Or your cat, because they only live like 14 years.
Yeah. Think about that a lot. One day I won't pick up my daughter because she's going to be bigger than me and I'm going to be old and decrepit.
Are we back at the fat shaming again? Is that what you're saying?
I think everything comes full circle.
Yeah,
it's the circle of life.
Circle.
You start with fat shaming, you end with fat shaming.
You do the ads, you do the closing remarks, then you fat shame some more.
Yep. Nathan, closing remarks.
We will all live to witness man-made horrors beyond our comprehension.
Great. Really, really awesome. Good luck.